Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto summon in World of One Piece for breeding with Nami and Robin? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unwilling Summoning. The world was an orchestra of chaos, and the Thousand Sunny was its unwilling conductor. Cannonballs screamed through the salt-laced air, their shrieks a terrible harmony with the SPL. Entering groan of wood and the roar of the sea. 10 warships, black hounds of the world government, had formed a ring of iron and fire, and the Straw Hat Pirates were trapped within. This was no mere skirmish, it was a buster call. A promise of absolute annihilation delivered with brutal efficiency. Nami gripped the ship's helm, her knuckles white, her teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached. Rain and sea spray lashed across her face, indistinguishable from the tears of frustration blurring her vision. Every feint, every desperate tack, every prayer to the wind was met with a new barrage. They were outmaneuvered, outgunned, and utterly exhausted. Her mind, a brilliant tapestry of charts and currents, was a maelstrom of failed calculations. There was no escape route. The wind was against them, the sea was a churning prison. And the iron jaws of the world government were closing in. More incoming, starboard side. Frankie's voice boomed from the bow, a frantic edge of steel beneath his usual bravado. A fresh volley of cannonballs ripped through the water, sending geysers of white foam erupting near their hull. The Sunny shuddered, a wounded animal crying out in protest. On the chaos of the main deck, Nico Robin moved with a chilling, desperate grace. Her arms crossed over her chest, eyes narrowed in concentration. See and fleur. Defensa. A web of countless arms sprouted from the deck and railings, their palms open, forming a series of fleshy, interlocking shields. The cannonballs struck with sickening thuds, the impact rippling through the constructs. Robin's breath hitched, a fine sheen of sweat beading on her brow. She could feel the concussive force of each impact, a phantom pain that echoed through her own body. This couldn't last. The sheer volume of the assault was overwhelming her, pushing her devil fruit powers to their absolute limit. Luffy stood defiantly on the Sunny's lion-headed prow, his small frame a silhouette of pure, unadulterated fury against the stormy sky. Gomu Gomu no, he inhaled, his chest swelling to comical proportions. Fusen. He became a massive rubber ball, deflecting a handful of cannonballs back towards their source with a resounding thwomp. They bounced off a warship's hull with a clang, a minor annoyance in the face of the overwhelming force. A flicker of frustration crossed his face. He was a cannon against a tidal wave. It's no good, Luffy. Sanji yelled, his black-clad leg a blur as he kicked a stray piece of flaming shrapnel off the deck. They're not even aiming for you. They're just trying to sink the ship. Vice Ad. Miral Onagumo stood on the bridge of his flagship, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. His 8 spidery arms, a grotesque result of his devil fruit power, were crossed behind his back. He watched the cornered pirate ship with the cold satisfaction of a predator. They are resilient, he muttered, his voice a low growl. But resilience is finite. Concentrate fire on their midsection. Snap the vessel in two. The order was relayed, and the volleys intensified, becoming a singular, unending roar. Hope was not just fading on the Thousand Sunny, it was being systematically blasted into oblivion. It was in this moment of absolute despair that Robin made her choice. Her defense wavered, the network of arms flickering as her concentration broke. She turned away from the battle, her eyes fixed on a small, lacquered box she had retrieved from her cabin. It was one of the few artifacts she had managed to save from the ashes of Ohara, a relic deemed too esoteric, too dangerous, for even her fellow scholars to study openly. It was covered in a script older than any she had ever encountered, a language that spoke of cosmic alignments and doorways between worlds. For years, it had been a puzzle. Now, it was their only prayer. Robin, what are you doing? We need you, Usopp shrieked, firing an explosive star from his kabuto with trembling hands. Robin didn't answer. She placed the box on the deck, the wood dark against the rain-slicked planks. She knelt, her hands hovering over its surface. The text wasn't a history, it was a set of instructions. A ritual, a summoning. It spoke of a confluence of will, a desperate cry across the void that could be answered by a soul of equal resonance. It was theoretical, a mad scholar's fantasy, but she had nothing left. She thought of her mother, of Saul, of the straw hats who had stormed Ennie's lobby and declared war on the world for her sake. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She would not let them die here. She pressed her palms against the box. It was not a plea for a weapon or a monster. It was a plea for a savior. She poured all of her will, all of her pain, her fear, and her fierce, desperate love for her crew into the artifact. The ancient glyphs on the box began to glow, a soft, ethereal blue light that pulsed in time with her frantic heartbeat. Nami saw it from the helm. "Robin, stop. What is that thing?" The light intensified, the blue shifting, brightening. The very air on the deck grew thick, heavy with an unseen pressure. The roar of the cannons seemed to fade, replaced by a low hum that vibrated in their bones. Onagumo, on his flagship, lowered his spyglass, a frown creasing his brow. "What is that light?" Robin grit her teeth, her entire body trembling with the effort. The text swirled in her mind, Fragum. Ents of translation she had painstakingly pieced together over the years. When the sea calls in its darkest hour, the sun shall answer, a maelstrom of gold to quell the tide, a union to birth a new era. She didn't understand what it truly meant, but she clung to the hope within the words. The blue light suddenly erupted, coalescing into a single, blinding point of energy above the box. The air tore open. It was not a door or a portal, but a violent, screeching rupture in the fabric of reality itself. From the tear, a light unlike any they had ever seen spilled forth. It wasn't the harsh white of a lightning strike or the warm yellow of the sun. It was gold, pure, liquid gold, so brilliant it forced every marine and pirate to shield their eyes. The world went silent. The cannons ceased their firing. The waves seemed to calm. For a single, breathless moment, there was only the light. Naruto Uzumaki sat cross-legged atop the stone head of Madara Uchiha, the cascading waters of the Valley of the End a familiar, soothing roar in his ears. The war was over. Kagaya was sealed. Peace, a fragile but tangible thing, had settled over the elemental nations. And yet, he felt a profound sense of dislocation. He was a hero, the seventh Hokage in waiting, the strongest shinobi alive. But the fight had been his purpose for so long, he felt adrift in the quiet that followed. He focused on the natural energy around him, letting it flow into his body. Sage mode settled over him, the orange pigmentation around his eyes a familiar mask. In this state, he could feel the world breathing. He could feel the life in the trees, the flow of the river, the heartbeat of a rabbit a mile away. It was a connection to the world that always centered him. Today, however, something felt wrong. A strange thrumming, a dissonant chord in the symphony of nature, plucked at the edge of his senses. He opened his eyes, his gold-flecked sage pupils scanning the valley. There was nothing, and yet, the feeling grew stronger. A pressure building not around him, but within him. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox sealed in his soul, stirred from his slumber. Naruto, the great beast's voice rumbled in his mind, a deep and ancient sound. What is this? This energy, it does not belong to our world. Before Naruto could reply, the pressure became immense. The very space around him seemed to warp and twist. The familiar roar of the waterfall distorted into a high-pitched whine. A blinding blue light enveloped him, and he felt a violent, gut-wrenching pull, as if a cosmic fishhook had snagged his very soul. He had no time to resist. No time to even comprehend. One moment, he was in his world, a pillar of strength and peace. The next, he was gone. He materialized on the deck of the Thousand Sunny in a shower of golden particles. The rupture in reality snapping shut behind him with a sound like tearing silk. The first thing that hit him was the smell. Salt, so thick and heavy it was almost suffocating. The second was the sound, a sudden, shocked silence that was somehow louder than the roar of battle that had preceded it. He stood there for a second, disoriented, his sage senses screaming at him. He was on some kind of wooden structure, surrounded by a vast, angry expanse of water under a stormy sky. Strange, towering metal objects floated on the water, bristling with what looked like cannons. And there were people, a bizarre collection of individuals staring at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. A boy in a straw hat, a green-haired man with 3 swords, a man in a suit with spiraling eyebrows, a terrified-looking long-nosed youth, and 2 women, one with fiery orange hair, her face a mask of shock and fear. The other, dark-haired and serene, knelt on the deck beside a strange, glowing box, her expression one of profound, exhausted awe. He didn't know where he was, or how he got here. But one thing was immediately, terrifyingly clear. He was in danger. Every one of those metal ships was a weapon pointed directly at him and the strange people he now stood among. Resume firing. Onagumo's voice boomed across the water, breaking the spell. Obliterate that light and whatever came from it. The cannons roared back to life. For the straw hats, time seemed to slow down. They saw the flashes from the cannons, the black spheres arcing through the air towards them. This was it, the final volley. They had been given a moment of bizarre hope, only to have it extinguished. But the stranger didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He simply moved. He vanished. Not in a burst of speed, but simply, gone. One moment he was standing there, the next, the space he occupied was empty. A fraction of a second later, he reappeared in the air, directly in the path of the incoming cannonballs. What the? Nami whispered, her voice lost in the wind. The man in the strange black and orange clothes raised a hand. A swirling sphere of brilliant blue energy, like a miniature hurricane, materialized in his palm. It spun with a high-pitched shriek that cut through the roar of the cannons. Rasengan, he yelled, his voice clear and powerful. He didn't block the cannonballs. He slammed the pinning sphere directly into the closest one. The moment of impact was silent. Then, the cannonball, a massive ball of solid iron, simply disintegrated. Not exploded. It was erased, its matter violently and completely unmade. The force of the impact continued outward in a visible shockwave, striking the other cannonballs in the volley and sending them careening wildly off course into the sea. Silence fell once more, this time heavier, colder, laced with utter disbelief. Every marine on every ship stared, their jaws agape. Naruto landed lightly back on the deck, his orange coat fluttering around him. He didn't spare the straw hats a glance. His eyes, now a piercing, inhuman gold, were locked onto the fleet. He could feel their killing intent, a foul, bitter taste in the air. They are numerous, Kurama noted, a hint of dark amusement in his tone. This might even be entertaining. Naruto's hands flew into a single, blurred hand sign. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The air on the deck of the Thousand Sunny exploded. In a series of smokeless puffs, the lone figure became 200. An army of identical men in orange and black filled every available space on the ship, spilling onto the railings. Even standing on the head of the lion prow next to a gobsmacked Luffy. They all moved with perfect synchronicity, a sea of determined faces turning as one to face the enemy fleet. What is this devil fruit? A marine captain stammered over a den mushi. It's not a devil fruit. Onagumo snarled, his confident smirk finally gone, replaced by a mask of fury and confusion. All ships, full assault. Do not let him breathe. The clones on the deck acted as one. Half of them leapt from the ship, running. They didn't fall into the water. Their feet, infused with a strange energy, found purchase on the churning surface of the sea as if it were solid ground. They charged across the waves towards the warships, a golden tidal wave of men. The other 100 clones remained on the ship. Let's give 'em a little wind. One of them grinned, his voice identical to the originals. They all raised their hands, and the air itself seemed to obey their command. A massive gust of wind, a controlled gale, erupted from the ship, not pushing it, but forming a protective barrier, a whirlwind that deflected the next frantic volley of cannonballs. Nami, still at the helm, felt the shift in the wind. It was powerful, yet precise. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was being controlled. Her mind, which had been frozen in despair, began to race again, but this time with 1,000 frantic, impossible questions. The clones reached the warships. The Marines, recovering from their shock, opened fire with rifles and cannons. It was a massacre, but not for the clones. They were blurs of motion, weaving through the gunfire with impossible agility. They swarmed up the sides of the ships, overwhelming the soldiers through sheer numbers and coordinated attacks. NGLE clone was a match for a dozen Marines, and there were dozens of clones on every ship. Back on the Sunny, the original Naruto watched the chaos he had unleashed, his expression unreadable. He needed information. And to get it, he needed to end this fight decisively. He looked at the flagship, sensing the strongest presence there. The leader. He held his right hand up, and a small, black rod materialized in his palm. He vanished from the Sunny's deck and reappeared on the railing of Onagumo's flagship in the same instant, a technique so fast it seemed like teleportation. The vice admiral's elite guard barely had time to register his presence before he was among them. He moved with a brutal, efficient grace, striking pressure points, dislocating joints, shattering jaws. He wasn't killing them, merely incapacitating them with a frightening and absolute precision. In 5 seconds, 20 men were on the deck, groaning and unconscious. Naruto stood before Vice Admiral Onagumo, the black rod held loosely in his hand. Onagumo, for the first time in his decorated career, felt a sliver of genuine fear. His 8 arms, holding 8 gleaming sabers, moved to attack. "Die, you monster!" he shrieked, lunging forward in a whirlwind of steel. Naruto didn't move, he simply raised his left hand. A miniature sun, a spinning vortex of wind and chakra so dense it screamed, appeared in his palm. It was larger, more violent than the Rasengan he had used before. It was a maelstrom of razor-sharp wind blades. Futon. Rasenshuriken. He didn't even need to throw it. He thrust it forward, meeting Onagumo's charge head-on. The 8 sabers shattered into dust before they even made contact. The Vice Admiral's eyes widened in horror as the spinning sphere of death touched his chest. There was no explosion, only a sound, a horrifying, microscopic severing, as billions of tiny wind needles pierced every cell in his body, destroying him from the inside out. He was thrown backward, crashing through the bridge of his own ship. His body mangled, his connection to his own nervous system utterly severed. With their leader gone, and their ships being systematically dismantled by an army of golden clones, the morale of the Marine fleet shattered. Chaos turned to panic. Ships began to turn, to flee, their orderly formation breaking into a frantic scramble for survival. The clones didn't pursue. Their job was done. One by one, they disappeared in puffs of smoke. The clones running across the sea vanished. The ones on the warships dispatched the last of the resistance and then dispelled themselves. The ones on the Sunny looked at the original, nodded, and vanished as well. In the space of less than 5 minutes, a full Buster Call, one of the world government's most devastating military weapons, had been not just defeated, but utterly and humiliatingly routed. The sea was suddenly quiet, the only sounds the creaking of the damaged Thousand Sunny and the distant crackle of fires on the few remaining, now fleeing marine vessels. Naruto stood on the deck of the flagship, the Rasenshuriken in his hand dissipating into nothing. He looked across the water to the pirate ship he had just saved. Then, with another flicker of movement, he was back on the Sunny's deck, standing in the exact same spot he had first appeared. He looked at the crew, his sage mode receding, the orange pigmentation around his eyes fading, leaving them a deep, vibrant blue. The inhuman warrior was gone, replaced by a young man who looked tired, confused, and wary. The straw hats stared back, a mixture of awe, terror, and dumbfounded silence filling the air. Zoro's hand was gripping the hilt of Wado Ikimonji so tightly his knuckles were white. Sanji had moved instinctively to stand in front of Nami and Robin. Frankie's metal fists were clenched. Luffy was the first to move. A massive, ear-to-ear grin split his face. He bounded forward, his rubbery arms stretching out, and wrapped them around the stunned Naruto in a tight hug. "Super!" Luffy screamed, his voice echoing across the now peaceful sea. "You're awesome. Join my crew." Naruto stiffened, completely unprepared for the gesture. He looked down at the boy in the straw hat, utterly bewildered. "Luffy, wait," Nami cried, finally finding her voice. She took a cautious step forward, her eyes wide. "Who? What are you?" Naruto gently untangled himself from Luffy's embrace. He looked at the orange-haired navigator, then at the dark-haired archaeologist who was slowly getting to her feet, her gaze intense and analytical. He scanned the faces of the others, seeing not malice, but a deep, profound shock. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice calm, though it did little to hide the undercurrent of confusion. He gestured vaguely at the retreating specks of the marine ships. "First, you can tell me who they were." He then looked around at the endless ocean, a sight so foreign to his homeland. Then, you can tell me where in the world I am. Robin's eyes drifted from Naruto's face down to the lacquered box at her feet. The glowing had faded, but it felt warm to the touch. The words of the prophecy echoed in her mind. A maelstrom of gold to quell the tide. She looked at the young man, at his bright yellow hair and overwhelming power. A maelstrom. It was him. And then the next line surfaced, a quiet, ominous whisper in the back of her consciousness. A union to birth a new era. Her gaze shifted between Naruto and Nami, the daughter of the sea, in her own way, a master of its currents and moods. A deep, unsettling blush rose to her cheeks as a sliver of the prophecy's potential meaning crashed into her with the force of a tidal wave. This was far more complicated than simply summoning a savior. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Tentative Alliance. The silence that followed the storm of battle was a fragile, crystalline thing, easily shattered. On the deck of the Thousand Sunny, the Straw Hat Pirates stood like statues in a bizarre tableau. Their eyes fixed on the blonde stranger who had just rewritten the laws of warfare. The immediate threat was gone, vanishing into the horizon as smoking specks of black, but a new, far more profound uncertainty had taken its place. It stood 5 feet, 6 inches tall, wore a tattered orange coat, and was currently looking at their captain with an expression of utter bafflement. "Join your crew," Naruto repeated, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. He took a half-step back from Luffy, whose grin hadn't faltered in the slightest. "I don't even know what a crew is, or where I am, or how I got here." Nami was the first to break from her stupor. The pragmatic navigator within her screamed that they were sitting ducks. The sea was never safe, least of all after a confrontation with a Buster Call. "We can't stay here," she snapped, the authority returning to her voice like a physical force. She spun on her heel, her orange hair whipping in the wind, and grabbed the helm. "Frankie, damage report, now. Chopper, check on everyone. The rest of you, get this deck cleared." We set sail immediately. Her orders cut through the lingering shock, and the crew, trained by countless battles, moved with renewed purpose. Frankie was already below deck, his heavy footsteps echoing. Chopper, his eyes still wide with a mixture of fear and medical fascination, began checking over the others for injuries. Usopp and Sanji started clearing the debris, kicking splintered wood and twisted shrapnel overboard. Zoro did not move. His gaze remained locked on Naruto, his hand still resting on the hilt of his sword. It wasn't an aggressive posture, but one of intense, unwavering vigilance. He was a coiled spring, a predator assessing an unknown creature that had just wandered into its territory. Naruto felt the swordsman's stare, a palpable pressure against his senses. He met it without aggression, his blue eyes calm and steady. He understood this language. It was the universal tongue of warriors. A silent questioning of strength and intent. "So," Sanji said, pausing his work to light a cigarette, his hands cupped against the wind. The small flame illuminated the suspect ion in his eyes as he looked Naruto up and down. "You just appear out of thin air, wave your hands, and a whole fleet runs away with its tail between its legs. You'll forgive us if we don't start handing out party favors just yet." His gaze flickered towards Nami and Robin, a familiar protective glint in his eye. "Especially when you appeared because of something Robin did." The accusation, though softly worded, hung in the air. Robin, who had been observing Naruto with a scholar's quiet intensity, finally spoke. "It was an act of desperation, Sanji-kun," she said, her voice even. "I did not know what would happen. I only knew that we were about to be destroyed." She looked at Naruto, her expression unreadable. "The artifact I used, it is a relic from Ohara. The text described a summoning ritual to call forth a guardian in a time of dire need. I never believed it could actually work." "A guardian," Usopp squeaked, peeking out from behind the main mast. "He looks more like a demon. Did you see his eyes? They were glowing. And that arm, that spinning thing." Naruto sighed. This was going to be complicated. He could sense their fear, their suspicion, their awe, a chaotic cocktail of emotions all directed at him. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Look, I'm just as confused as you are. One minute I'm home, the next I'm here. I don't want any trouble. I just want to understand what's going on." Frankie's head and shoulders suddenly popped up from a hatch in the deck. "Damage ain't super bad," he announced, his voice a welcome break in the tension. "Some serious scoring. On the hull and the main mast is splintered, but the Sunny's spirit is strong. We can sail. But Nami sis, where are we heading?" Nami scanned the horizon, her brow furrowed in concentration. The log P.O.s on her wrist was spinning erratically, useless in the aftermath of such a large-scale conflict. "Away," she said simply. "We just need to put as much distance between us and this spot as possible. I'll find a current and we'll ride it until the pose settles." As the Sunny began to pick up speed, a semblance of order returned. The crew worked, but they all kept stealing glances at Naruto, who had been left standing awkwardly in the middle of the deck. Luffy, naturally, was the one to bridge the gap. "So your name's Naruto?" he asked, plopping down cross-legged in front of him. "That was a really cool trick with all the U's. Was that a devil fruit? What did you eat? The clone fruit? The punch fruit?" Naruto blinked. "Devil fruit. Eat." He shook his head. "No. That was a jutsu. It's chakra." The blank stares he received told him that explanation was useless. He tried again. "It's the energy inside me. I can mold it to do things. Create clones, walk on water, make the wind blow." Sanji, who had been listening, scoffed. "Walk on water? The only people who can do that are monsters who've eaten a devil fruit and lost their ability to swim, or that fish freak cook from the Bharati. You're telling us you can just decide to run on the ocean?" "Yes," Naruto said, unsure why that was so strange. This was the opening Zoro had been waiting for. He pushed off from the railing, his sandals making a soft sound on the wet deck. He walked towards Naruto, his movements fluid and deliberate. "You talk a lot," Zoro said, his voice a low rumble. "Words are wind. Your power, I felt it. It's immense. But I don't know what it is. I don't know your heart." He drew one of his katanas, the white-sheathed Wado Ikimonji, holding it loosely at his side. "I need to know if the power that just saved this ship is the same power that might turn on it later." The rest of the crew froze. "Zoro, stop it," Nami yelled from the helm. "No, let him," Naruto said, his voice calm. He turned to face the swordsman fully. He recognized Zoro's type. He'd fought and befriended men like him his entire life. Men who only trusted what they could test with their own hands, with their own steel. "He's right to be cautious." Zoro's lips curled into a faint, predatory grin. "Good." He didn't announce his attack. He was simply a green blur, covering the distance between them in an instant, his blade slicing through the air in a clean, lethal arc aimed at Naruto's neck. "Itoryu Ei. Shishi Sunsun. One sword style draw and resheath technique, Lion's Song." Usopp screamed. Sanji cursed and moved to intervene. But it was over before it began. Just as the blade was about to make contact, Naruto disappeared. There was no burst of speed, no flicker of movement. He was just gone. Zoro's blade cut through empty air, the force of his swing carrying him a step forward. He stumbled, his eyes wide with disbelief. He whirled around, his senses on high alert, searching for his opponent. Up here. Zoro's head snapped up. Naruto was standing perfectly balanced on the thin railing of the observation deck, looking down at him, his arms crossed. He hadn't just dodged. He had moved from the center of the deck to the top of the mast in the space between one heartbeat and the next, without making a sound. Zoro's grin widened, a spark of genuine excitement in his eyes. "Not bad." He sheathed his sword with a decisive click. "You're fast. You're not slow yourself," Naruto replied, hopping down from the railing and landing silently on the deck. He hadn't even drawn a weapon. He hadn't needed to. The point was made. The immense, overwhelming power he had displayed against the fleet was matched by a level of speed and control that was just as terrifying. He could have killed any one of them before they could even react. The fact that he hadn't was a statement in itself. Zoro grunted, a sound of grudging respect. He walked back to his spot by the railing and sat down, leaning his swords against it. The test was over. For now. With the tension broken, a flood of questions was unleashed. Over the next hour, as the Thousand Sunny cut a path through the unfamiliar sea, they tried to explain their world. They told him about the Grand Line, the Four Blues, the world government and its absolute justice. They explained the Marines, the Shichibukai, and the Yonko. Chopper, with his medical knowledge, tried to explain the biology of devil fruits, how they rewrote a person's DNA in exchange for their ability to swim. Naruto listened patiently, absorbing the information with a shinobi's focus. It was a world of pirates and marines, of bizarre powers born from fruit, of a vast, unconquerable ocean. It was insane. In turn, he gave them a heavily condensed version of his own life. He spoke of shinobi villages, of the 5 great nations, of the tailed beasts, and of the war he had just finished fighting. He kept the details sparse, but the weight of his experience was evident in his voice. So let me get this straight, Usopp said, his mind clearly struggling to keep up. You're a ninja, and you can make copies of yourself, and walk on water, and you have a giant, grumpy fox monster living in your stomach. Naruto nodded. Pretty much. Super. Frankie yelled, striking a pose. A cyborg, a ninja, and a talking reindeer. This crew just keeps getting cooler. Amidst the chaotic exchange of information, Nami's mind was working on a different level. Power, to her, had always been a tool for survival, and survival often came down to one thing: money. She watched Naruto, her mind reeling. The man had single-handedly defeated a military force that could level an entire island. He could create solid matter out of thin air. What was the value of a power like that? She approached him cautiously, a clipboard and pen suddenly in her hand. So, Naruto, she began, a business-like glint in her eyes. This jutsu of yours. It's very impressive, and you saved us, which we're all very grateful for. Naruto eyed the clipboard warily. You're welcome, I guess. Right. So, what would you say your standard rate is for, say, destroying a naval fleet? We can discuss a retainer for future services, of course. We're a bit short on liquid assets at the moment, but we have considerable treasure prospects. The entire crew face-faulted. Nami, you can't try to charge the guy who just saved our lives. Usopp and Chopper shrieked in unison. Naruto just looked confused. Wait, you want to pay me? Well, yes, Nami said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. A service was rendered. Naruto had never really operated on the concept of money. He got a stipend from the village, he was paid for missions, but he never thought of his power in terms of financial value. He looked at Nami's earnest, greedy face and an idea, a memory of an old, pervy teacher, sparked in his mind. He held up a hand. Hold on. He made a single hand sign. With a soft poof, a perfect copy of himself appeared next to him. The clone grinned, gave Nami a wink, and then, in a second poof, transformed. Where the clone had stood, there was now a life-sized statue of Naruto, striking a heroic pose. It was made of solid, gleaming, 24-karat gold. The deck went silent. Nami's clipboard and pen clattered to the floor. Her eyes, wide as dinner plates, slowly developed little belly symbols in them. She walked over to the statue. Her movement stiff, robotic. She tapped it. It was solid. She licked it. It was metallic. Is this real? She whispered, her voice trembling. Yeah, it's just a transformation jutsu. But I made the clone solid first, Naruto explained, scratching the back of his head. It'll disappear if I run out of chakra or dismiss it, but I can hold it for a while. Is this enough payment? Nami slowly turned to face him, tears of pure, unadulterated avarice streaming down her face. She threw her arms around him. You can stay forever. Later that night, a fragile peace had settled over the ship. The crew, exhausted from the battle and the revelations that followed, had turned in early. Only the night watch and a few restless souls remained on deck. Naruto stood by the port railing, staring out at the ocean. It was so different from the world he knew. No land in sight, just an endless expanse of dark water under a blanket of unfamiliar stars. The feeling of dislocation was a physical ache in his chest. You can't sleep either. He turned. Nico Robin was walking towards him, a book held loosely in her hand. She came to stand beside him at the railing, her presence calm and unobtrusive. It's a lot to take in, Naruto admitted, turning his gaze back to the sea. A whole new world, new rules. It's loud. This is the grand line, Robin said with a soft smile. Loud as its natural state. Thank you for what you did today. You saved us all. I just reacted, he said. They were trying to kill you. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the Sunny's hull. The box I used, Robin said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. The artifact from my home. I have spent 20 years trying to decipher its text. I believe I have finally translated the most crucial passage. Naruto turned to look at her. Her expression was grave. It is a prophecy, of a sort, she continued, her eyes meeting his. It speaks of a time when the world is drowning in a false justice, when the truth of history is on the verge of being extinguished forever. It says, when the sea calls in its darkest hour, the sun shall answer. A maelstrom of gold to quell the tide, and through a union of sun and sea, a new era shall be born. Naruto's blood ran cold. Prophecy. It was a word he had lived under. A shadow that had dictated his entire life. The child of the prophecy, destined to save the world. He had hated it, he had fought against it, screamed his defiance at it, and in the end, had fulfilled it on his own terms. My name, Naruto, it can mean, maelstrom, he said quietly. And my father was called the Yellow Flash. My hair, they called me the Golden Sun of our village. He looked at her, a dawning, uncomfortable realization on his face. This union, what does it mean? Robin's composure, for the first time, seemed to crack. A faint blush touched her cheeks. I am not certain, she said, choosing her words carefully. The glyph for union can be interpreted in many ways. A simple alliance, a joining of ideals, or a more literal, physical joining. To breed a child who would inherit the strengths of both. The word hung in the air between them, awkward and heavy. Breeding. He had been summoned like a prize stud horse. The thought was both absurd and deeply insulting. A bitter laugh escaped Naruto's lips. Of course, he said, shaking his head. Another prophecy. Another destiny someone else wrote for me. He looked at Robin, and for the first time, she saw the true depth of the loneliness in his eyes. Let me tell you something about prophecies, Robin. They're just stories. People use them to control you, to tell you who you're supposed to be. I was supposed to be a monster, then a savior. I decided to just be myself. Whatever that box says, whatever this union is supposed to be, it doesn't matter. Your choices are your own. My choices are my own. No old prophecy is going to change that. Robin stared at him, her dark eyes wide. All her life, she had been defined by others. The demon of Ohara, the last survivor, a tool for those who wanted to read the poneglyphs. Her fate was to be hunted, to die alone with her forbidden knowledge. And here was a man from another world, a being of immense power, who spoke of destiny with such profound and weary disdain. He wasn't just rejecting the prophecy for himself, he was offering that freedom to her, as well. In that moment, she felt a connection to him that went deeper than gratitude. It was a kinship of souls who had been branded by fate and had chosen to fight back. I believe you, she whispered, a genuine, unguarded smile gracing her lips for the first time. Naruto Uzumaki. Far away, in the hallowed, sterile halls of Mary Geoise, the 5 elders received the report. They stood in shadow, their ancient faces grim. A buster call, one of them said, his voice like rustling parchment. 10 vice admirals and 20,000 men, annihilated. By a single entity. Vice Admiral Onagumo is incapacitated, another reported. The survivors' testimonies are incoherent. They speak of an army that appeared from nowhere. A man who ran on water and held a sun in his hand. An anomaly, the tallest of the elders stated. One that appeared on the ship of the Straw Hats, the vessel carrying the demon of Ohara. This is no coincidence, the swordsman of the group rasped, his hand resting on the hilt of his own katana. An unknown power of this magnitude, appearing in such close proxy. Midi to the one woman who can unravel the void century, it is an unacceptable threat to the balance of the world. The 5th elder, a man with a large, crescent-shaped mustache, looked down at a document in his hand. There is a unit perfectly suited for such a task. They are ruthless, efficient, and operate outside the standard chain of command. He looked up, his eyes cold and hard. Activate Cipher Polygus 0. Their mission is simple. Investigate this, Naruto Uzumaki. Determine the nature of his power. And if he cannot be controlled, eliminate him. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Golden Maelstrom of Water 7. The city of water rose from the sea like a dream. Waterfalls cascaded from impossible heights, feeding a labyrinth of canals that served as streets, plied by strange, fish-like vessels called Yagara bulls. Buildings stacked atop one another in a vibrant, chaotic display of architectural genius, all centered around a colossal fountain that perpetually launched a plume of white water into the sky. To Naruto, who had grown up surrounded by forests and mountains, Water 7 was a beautiful, bewildering impossibility. The Thousand Sunny, bearing the fresh scars of its recent battle, limped into Dock 1. The news, carried by the screeching news coups and the frantic, scrambled whispers of marine communications, had arrived long before them. The story was a garbled, unbelievable mess: a single pirate ship, a full buster call, and a golden-haired man who had single-handedly turned the tide. As the Straw Hats disembarked, they were met not with cheers or jeers, but with a tense, watchful silence. The shipwrights of the Galila Company, the toughest hands in the city, stopped their work, their hammers and saws falling quiet. They stared, their gazes drawn to the unfamiliar figure in orange and black standing amongst the infamous pirates. "Yo, iceberg, we're here for repairs," Luffy shouted, his voice echoing across the dock, blissfully ignorant of the tension. A man in a finely tailored suit, with blue hair and a perpetually calm demeanor, stepped forward from the crowd of shipwrights. This was Iceberg, the mayor of Water 7 and president of the Galila Company. His eyes, however, were not on Luffy. They were fixed on Naruto, a keen, analytical intelligence behind his relaxed facade. "Straw Hat," Iceberg said, his voice even. "Your timing is, as always, impeccable. You bring a storm with you wherever you go, it seems." His gaze swept over the damage to the Sunny. "And it looks like you sailed right through this one. We'll take a look at your ship. As for your new companion," he added, his eyes narrowing slightly, "the entire city is whispering about him. They're calling him the Kaniro no Uzu, the Golden Maelstrom." Naruto felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Using his Sage Mode, which he kept active at a low, almost undetectable level, he could feel the city's emotional state. It was a turbulent sea of fear, curiosity, and a deep-seated apprehension. These people weren't hostile, but they were afraid of the unknown power he represented. "Frankie, my brother," a chorus of voices roared as a group of flamboyantly dressed men with metal-studded pompadours rushed forward. Tears streaming down their faces. The Frankie family swarmed their former leader, their joyous reunion a pocket of warmth in the otherwise chilly reception. "All right, you crybabies, knock it off," Frankie laughed, ruffling their hair. He then turned and slapped Naruto on the back with enough force to stagger a normal man. "This is Naruto. He's the one who saved our butts. He's a ninja. He can make gold statues." The introduction did little to ease the tension, only adding another layer of bizarre myth to the rumors. As the Galila foremen began their assessment of the Sunny, Nami took charge. "Okay, listen up. We need supplies, and we need to exchange that payment for belly," she said, patting the now cloth-wrapped golden statue that Sanji and Zoro were reluctantly carrying. "Naruto, you're with me. I'm not letting you and this thing out of my sight." The walk through the lower canals of Water 7 was an assault on the senses. The air was thick with the smell of sea salt and sawdust. The shouts of vendors and the rhythmic splash of the Yagara bulls. People cleared a path for them, their whispers following them like a wake. Nami, usually adept at blending in, found the attention unnerving. Naruto, however, seemed unfazed. He was looking around with wide, curious eyes, taking in the impossible cityscape with the wonder of a child. "This place is amazing," he said, watching a Yagara bull paddle past with a load of lumber. "It's all built on the water. How does it not sink?" "Centuries of skill and innovation," came a voice from behind them. Nico Robin had joined them, her expression as placid as ever. "The shipwrights of Water 7 are the best in the world." She was watching Naruto, not with suspicion, but with a deep, scholarly interest. He was studying how he reacted to this new environment, how he carried himself among the crowds. He wasn't arrogant, nor was he timid. He moved with a quiet confidence, an awareness of his surroundings that was second nature. It was the walk of a man who had been a soldier his entire life. Their errands were a strange mix of the mundane and the extraordinary. The gold exchange merchant nearly had a heart attack when Nami unveiled the statue. They left with several large chests filled to the brim with belly, a haul so large it made Nami giddy. But throughout their trip, Naruto felt a persistent, prickling sensation on the back of his neck. It was the feeling of being watched. Not by the curious citizens, but by something else. Something hidden. There are 3 of them, Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind. Maybe 4. They move without sound. Their presence is faint, deliberately suppressed. Shinobi. No. Naruto thought back. Something else. Their life force feels disciplined. Hardened. Like Anbu, but different. He didn't let on that he knew. He continued to play the part of the bewildered tourist, laughing at Luffy's antics as their captain tried to eat an entire street vendor's cart of mizu mizu meat. But his senses were stretched taut, mapping the shadows, tracking the unseen figures who flitted across the rooftops with unnatural speed. In a darkened room overlooking the central fountain, a man knelt, polishing a pair of immaculate white gloves. He was lean and tall, with slicked back black hair and eyes that were cold and empty, like chips of obsidian. This was Kageyama, the leader of Cypher Pol Igus Zero. His subordinates, all clad in the black suits of government agents, stood silently around him. The target is with the navigator and the archaeologist, one of the agents reported. His voice flat and emotionless. The rest of the straw hats are scattered. The swordsman is at a forge, the cook is at the market, and Straw Hat himself is eating. Kageyama Fini shed with his gloves and slipped them on, his movements precise and economical. The report from Vice Admiral Onagumo's survivors was hysterical, but consistent on one point: the target creates duplicates of himself. An army of them. A frontal assault would be illogical. We must isolate the original. And how do we identify him, sir? Another agent asked. If they are perfect copies. There is always a source, Kageyama said, rising to his feet. An original emanates a pressure the copies lack. And according to our intelligence, there is another way. He held up a small, grayish stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. Sea stone. It disrupts the power of devil fruits. Our working theory is that the target's jutsu is a similar, yet unknown, form of energy manipulation. We will test that theory. Our primary objective is to capture him. If capture is not possible, he paused, his cold gaze sweeping over his agents, eliminate him. The world government cannot allow such an UNPR, edictable power to remain in the hands of pirates. Begin the operation. The first sign of trouble was subtle. The Frankie family, who had been loudly celebrating in their headquarters, suddenly went silent. Usopp, who had been with them detailing his own, mostly fabricated, tales of bravery, felt a sudden chill. Hey, is everyone okay? He asked, turning around. The room was empty. The doors and windows were barred from the outside. He was trapped. At the market, Sanji was haggling over a rare blue-finned elephant tuna when the vendor's eyes went wide with fear. Sanji spun around just in time to see a dozen black-suited figures drop from the awnings above, surrounding him. Well, he said, dropping his groceries and taking a drag from his cigarette. Looks like the government goons are making a house call. The city erupted. Naruto felt it instantly through Sage mode. The sudden spikes of aggression, the flaring life forces of his new comrades as they were engaged in combat. It's a trap, he said, his voice low and serious. Nami and Robin spun around, their expressions hardening. CP9. Robin whispered, the name a curse on her lips. Worse, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the rooftops. They're organized. They're trying to separate us. Before he could say more, the street in front of them exploded, a geyser of water and cobblestone erupting from the canal. When the water subsided, Kageyama stood there, flanked by 2 of his elite agents. He was dabbing a piece of stray debris from his perfect suit with a handkerchief. Naruto Uzumaki, Kageyama said, his voice devoid of any emotion. On behalf of the world government, you are to come with us for questioning. Resistance will be inconvenient. Nami instinctively reached for her klima tact. Who the hell are you? That's him, Naruto said, ignoring her question. His eyes were locked on Kageyama. He's the leader. He turned to Nami and Robin. Get back to the ship. Find the others. This is going to get messy. We're not leaving you, Nami shot back. I'm not asking. Naruto's tone was flat, leaving no room for argument. He made a single hand sign. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a cloud of smoke that filled the entire plaza, 200 Narutos appeared. The effect on the city was instantaneous. Citizens screamed and fled as the army of blonde men spread out, not attacking, but creating a perimeter. Some clones formed a wall around Nami and Robin, shielding them. Others leapt onto the rooftops, their voices calling out. Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, report. All civilians, head to the main docks. We'll protect you. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Kageyama watched, his expression unchanging, as the clones turned his surgical strike into a citywide brawl. He had anticipated the clones, but not this. This wasn't just a combat technique, it was a strategic command and control system. Impressive, he murmured. He then vanished. He used Soru, moving so fast he was invisible to the naked eye. He appeared directly in front of the Naruto who had spoken, his finger extended like a spear. Shigen. His finger, hardened to the strength of a bullet, struck Naruto's chest. But instead of piercing flesh, the clone burst into a puff of smoke. Kageyama was already moving again, appearing behind another clone, then another, his Shigen dispatching them with ruthless efficiency. He was a phantom, a blur of black cloth and deadly strikes, reaping a harvest of smoke. While Kageyama was occupied, the clones began their work. One group found the Frankie house, blew the door off its hinges, and freed a grateful Usopp. Another group joined Sanji's battle at the market, overwhelming the agents with sheer numbers. On a high bridge overlooking the canals, Nami and Robin were being escorted by a squad of clones when a new threat appeared. An agent, a massive man with arms like steel girders, landed in front of them, shattering the stone bridge. Tekai, he roared, his body becoming as hard, as iron as the clones. Punches and kicks glanced off him harmlessly. Let us handle this, Nami said to the clones. She looked at Robin, a look of understanding passing between them. My thoughts exactly, Robin replied. Go, Nami yelled at the clones. Help the others, we've got this. The clones, programmed with Naruto's trust in his friends, nodded and leapt away to join other skirmishes. The Tekai user laughed. 2 weak women against me. This will be easy. Nami smirked, assembling her Klima tact. I'm going to need a storm cloud. A really big, nasty one. She pointed her staff at the sky. Thunder breed tempo. Small, dark clouds began to form above them. Robin crossed her arms. Mil Fleur. Gigantsko Mono. 2 giant arms, each the size of a small building, sprouted from the sides of the bridge, grabbing the agent and pinning him in place. Now what? The agent grunted, struggling against the immense pressure. Nami pointed her Klima tact at the struggling giant. The dark clouds above him crackled with energy. Naruto's not the only one who can cause a maelstrom, she said, a wicked glint in her eye. Thunderbolt tempo. A massive bolt of lightning crashed down, engulfing the agent in a blinding flash of white. He screamed, his iron-hard body conducting the electricity perfectly. He collapsed, smoking and twitching. Meanwhile, Naruto, the real one, was leaping across the rooftops. His Sage Mode senses tracking Kageyama's movements. The agent was unbelievably fast, and his ability to distinguish the clones from the original was uncanny. But Naruto wasn't fighting him. He was learning. Every clone Kageyama dispatched was a piece of intel. He favors his right side for Shigen. His Soru has a telltale flicker just before he moves. He's trying to herd me towards the city center. Naruto landed in the Grand Plaza, in front of the massive central fountain. He let his clones dissipate, leaving him standing alone in the rain-slicked square. All right, that's enough, he yelled. It's me you want. Let's finish this. Kageyama appeared on the far side of the plaza, not a speck of dust on his suit. You have caused a great deal of trouble, Naruto Uzumaki. But your deception ends now. I have found the source. Quote, he charged. Naruto met him head-on, his hand forming the familiar swirling blue sphere. Rasengan. As they were about to collide, Naruto felt a strange sensation, a cold wave that washed over him. His Rasengan, the pinnacle of his chakra control, sputtered and died in his palm. The chakra in his body felt sluggish, muted. In that moment of shock, Kageyama struck. Not with a Shigen, but with the palm of his hand, striking a pressure point in Naruto's shoulder. A numbing pain shot through Naruto's arm, and he stumbled back. My power, Kageyama stated, a flicker of triumph in his cold eyes. The Nagi no mi. The calm fruit. In a radius around me, all sound is silenced. All abilities are nullified. Naruto's eyes widened. This man could turn off his chakra. Your energy is powerful, but it is still just an ability, Kageyama said, advancing slowly. And now, you are just a man. A man against a master of Rokushiki. He was a blur again, appearing in front of Naruto. His kicks and finger pistols a relentless storm. Naruto was forced onto the defensive, blocking and dodging. He was strong, incredibly strong, but without his jutsu, he was being overwhelmed. Kageyama's attacks were precise, aimed at his joints and vital points. A Rankyaku kick sliced through the air, and Naruto dodged, but the air blade still cut a shallow gash on his cheek. Kageyama pressed his advantage, his confidence growing. He saw his opening, a flicker of imbalance as Naruto avoided a Shigen. He moved in for the final blow, a two-fingered strike aimed at Naruto's throat. But as his fingers were an inch away, Naruto's eyes snapped open, and they weren't blue anymore. They were gold, with the horizontal bar of a toad sage. The orange pigmentation of sage mode flared around his eyes. You nullify abilities, Naruto grunted, catching Kageyama's wrist in a grip of iron. But this isn't an ability. This is natural energy, the life of the world itself. Kageyama's eyes widened in shock. The man in front of him was suddenly bigger. Not physically, but his presence, his sheer power, had magnified tenfold. Naruto's other hand shot out, not in a punch, but with his palm open. It was Frog Kata. Kageyama couldn't see the attack, but he felt it, an invisible aura of natural energy that smashed into his chest like a freight train. He was sent flying across the plaza, skipping across the water of the fountain like a stone before crashing into the far wall. He slumped to the ground, coughing up blood, his suit ruined. His nullification field was still active, but it didn't matter. Naruto walked towards him, his movements now impossibly fast, his strength overwhelming. The fight was no longer a dance of techniques, it was a beatdown. Naruto's Frog Kata was relentless, his strikes landing with brutal, untraceable force. The Naruto that Kageyama had been fighting, the one who had led him to the plaza, suddenly burst into a puff of smoke. The real Naruto, who had been gathering natural energy while hidden beneath the fountain's waters, landed silently behind the stunned agent. A shinobi's greatest weapon isn't his jutsu, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. It's deception. He drove a fist into Kageyama's gut. The master assassin crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. The remaining CP-0 agents, seeing their leader fall, hesitated for a fatal second. It was all the Straw Hats, now regrouped and furious, needed. The rest of the battle was short and decisive. Later, as a watery sun began to set, the Straw Hats gathered on the deck of the Sunny. The Galley La crew and the Frankie family were cheering, celebrating the defeat of the government agents. Iceberg stood with the crew, a look of profound respect on his face. You not only saved yourselves, the mayor said, looking at Naruto. You saved my city from a shadow war it never would have seen coming. Water 7 is in your debt. Nami and Robin were standing next to Naruto, dabbing a cloth on the cut on his cheek. You were incredible, Naruto, Nami said, her voice softer than usual. The way you organized those clones, how you figured out his weakness, it was amazing. We made a good team, Robin added, her smile genuine. Your wind and Nami's lightning. My arms and your clones' diversions. It was seamless. Naruto looked at them, at the easy way they stood beside him. The genuine care in their eyes. He looked over at Luffy, who was stuffing his face with food from a celebratory banquet, at Zoro and Sanji arguing, at Usopp and Chopper listening with rapt attention as Frankie described the battle. A feeling of warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't realized he'd been missing so badly. He was still lost, still a million miles from home. But as he stood there, on the deck of a pirate ship in a city that floated on the sea, surrounded by the most bizarre and loyal people he had ever met, he felt a little less like a stranger, and a little more like he was part of a crew. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Void Century. The celebration in Water 7 was a vibrant, roaring affair, a testament to the city's resilient spirit. Barrels of ale were cracked open, and the air filled with the sounds of sea shanties and laughter. The straw hats were at the heart of it, toasted as heroes. But amidst the revelry, a quiet and unsettling work was being done. In a secure room provided by Iceberg, Nico Robin knelt over the unconscious form of Kageyama. The other CP-0 agents had been disarmed and bound by the galley Foreman, their strange, silent arrogance replaced by sullen defeat. While Chopper treated the government agent's injuries, just enough to ensure he wouldn't die, Robin conducted a meticulous search. She found what she was looking for tucked into a hidden lining of Kageyama's pristine white suit. It wasn't a Den Mushi or a standard report. It was a small, tightly rolled scroll of parchment, sealed not with wax, but with a complex wire clasp. The parchment was inscribed with a cipher, but it was unlike any marine or cipher pole code she had ever seen. The characters were angular, ancient, bearing a faint resemblance to the script she had seen on the most archaic of historical texts. "This is not a government code," she murmured, her fingers tracing the strange glyphs. "This is something else, something much, much older." Later that night, the Thousand Sunny slipped its moorings, pushing out into the dark, quiet sea under the watchful gaze of a grateful city. The party was over, and a somber mood had settled upon the crew. They had won, but the victory had been a stark reminder that they were now facing an enemy more insidious and organized than any brutish pirate crew. They were being hunted by the world government's most elite assassins. In the ship's library, which doubled as an aquarium, Robin was surrounded by books and charts, a single lamp casting a warm glow on her focused expression. The scroll was spread out before her, its secret stubbornly locked away. She had been at it for hours, cross-referencing symbols, testing cryptographic keys, and growing more frustrated with every dead end. A soft knock came at the door. "Can I come in?" Robin looked up to see Naruto standing in the doorway, a tray in his hands. On it were 2 steaming mugs of tea and a plate of Sanji's late-night sandwiches. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray down on a clear space on the table. "You've been staring at that thing since we left port." "It's a puzzle I cannot seem to solve," Robin admitted, a weary sigh escaping her lips. "The syntax is all wrong. It's almost as if it's designed to be unreadable without a specific, non-linguistic key." Naruto looked at the complex array of symbols. He couldn't make sense of them, but he understood the nature of the problem. He had spent years of his life trying to decipher Jiraiya's ridiculously coded messages. "Maybe you're thinking about it too hard," he suggested. "Sometimes with codes, you just have to try everything at once." Robin gave him a tired smile. "I wish it were that simple. There are millions of possible permutations. It would take me weeks, perhaps months, to test them all." Naruto's own smile was mischievous. "For you, yeah. For me," he stepped back and made a familiar hand sign. "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The library was suddenly, impossibly full. 1,000 Narutos crammed into the space, sitting on the floor, perched on the aquarium, hanging from the bookshelves. They were all grinning, looking at Robin with an expectant eagerness. "1,000 brains are better than one, right?" the original Naruto said, gesturing to the silent, attentive army. Robin stared, utterly speechless. She had seen him use the technique in battle, as a weapon of overwhelming force. She had never considered its utility for something like this. Her mind, a brilliant instrument of logic and deduction, began to race, seeing the incredible potential. Millions of permutations, which had seemed an insurmountable wall, were now a simple matter of delegation. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. "All right," she said, her voice filled with a renewed energy. "Listen up. Clone A-1 through A-100, you'll start with a reverse alphabetical substitution cipher. B1 through B100, you'll try a numerical transposition based on the Fibonacci sequence." What followed was the most bizarre and efficient act of cryptography the world had ever seen. Robin directed the clones like a conductor leading an orchestra, her voice clear and precise as she outlined complex theories and algorithms. The clones, each with a perfect copy of Naruto's focus, set to work, scribbling on scraps of paper, muttering to themselves. Testing and discarding theories at a dizzying pace. The library was filled with the quiet hum of intense, collaborative thought. It was a perfect fusion of her brilliant mind and his impossible power. Naruto, the real one, simply sat with her, refilling her tea, watching her work with a look of profound admiration. He was seeing a side of her that the others rarely did, not the calm, reserved archaeologist, but a passionate, relentless scholar in her element, her eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Hours passed. Finally, one of the clones perched on the globe in the corner shot up. "Got it," he yelled, waving a piece of paper. "It's not a substitution cipher. It's a three-dimensional one. You have to read it vertically, then horizontally, then diagonally across a conceptual cube. The key is the date of the founding of Ohara." Quote, all the other clones vanished in puffs of smoke, their collective knowledge flowing back into the original. Robin lunged for the paper, her eyes scanning the decoded message. Her breath caught in her throat. "It's not orders," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a location, a riddle." She looked at Naruto, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It speaks of a phantom island, a place called Vital. It's not on any known chart. The riddle says it is hidden, behind a veil of tears, and that its gate opens only for those who carry the weight of a world on their shoulders." Navigating to a place that didn't exist on a map was precisely the kind of challenge that made Nami's blood sing. Armed with Robin's translation and the cryptic coordinates, she took to the helm with a fierce determination. For 2 days, they sailed through an unnervingly calm stretch of the Grand Line. Then, they saw it. A wall of impenetrable fog, stretching from the sea to the sky. It wasn't natural. It felt cold, ancient, and sorrowful. "A veil of tears," Nami murmured, her knuckles white on the ship's wheel. The log pose was spinning uselessly. "This is it. How do we get through?" Usopp asked, his voice trembling as he stared at the oppressive gray wall. "We don't go through," Nami said, a spark of insight in her eyes. "We go with it." She began reading the subtle currents, the slight shifts in wind temperature, things only she could perceive. She wasn't fighting the sea, she was listening to it, letting its secret whispers guide her. The Sunny turned, sailing parallel to the fog bank, until Nami found what she was looking for, a barely perceptible current that flowed not away from the fog, but directly into it. "Hold on," she yelled. The ship plunged into the mist. The world disappeared, replaced by a thick, disorienting gray. The air grew cold, and a profound silence fell, broken only by the creak of the ship's timbers. It felt like they were sailing through a ghost's memory. Then, just as suddenly as it began, they broke through. The sight that greeted them stole their breath. It was an island, but like none they had ever seen. Towering, ancient trees with silvery bark reached for a sky that was a soft, twilight purple. Luminescent moss cast a gentle glow on ruins of white stone that were seamlessly integrated with the nature around them. As if the city had grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. A profound sense of peace and immense age permeated the air. As they docked, they saw figures emerging from the silvery woods. They weren't human. They were tall, slender beings made of woven light and living wood, their faces indistinct, with gentle, glowing orbs where their eyes should be. They carried no weapons. They did not speak, but a collective voice echoed not in their ears, but directly in their minds. "Welcome, children of the sea. Welcome, child from beyond the sun." The straw hats stood frozen, unsure how to react. These were the guardians of Vital. "We have felt your approach," the voice continued, its tone ancient and patient. "We have felt the echo of the great schism you carry within you, Naruto Uzumaki. You seek the knowledge, but knowledge is a weight. It can anchor a soul or it can drown it. We must know your hearts before we can share our burden." "The weight of a world," Robin whispered. Understanding the riddle, it wasn't a metaphor for strength. It was literal. "Naruto, coming from another world. You three," the voice resonated, and Naruto, Nami, and Robin felt a gentle but irresistible pull. The world around them seemed to shimmer and fade. "Your pasts have shaped you. Your pain has tempered you. Let us see if you have the strength not to conquer your history, but to accept it." The world dissolved into white light. They found themselves standing on a dusty, sun-baked road. In the distance, a crude, hand-drawn sign read, "Kokoyashi Village." Nami gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was her home, but as it was under Arlong's rule. The air was thick with despair. Naruto and Robin were there with her, not as ghosts, but as solid presences. They could feel the heat, smell the salt and the fear. The hulking form of Arlong appeared, his cruel laughter scraping at their nerves. He grabbed a young Nami by the arm. "You belong to me, little navigator," he sneered. "You will draw maps for me. Forever." Nami trembled, the old, helpless rage boiling within her. But then, the vision shifted. Naruto stepped forward, his eyes glowing gold with sage mode. "I won't let you hurt her," he growled. His body erupted in a cloak of golden chakra, the form of Kurama manifesting around him. "I'll erase you. I'll erase this whole island if I have to." A massive, tailed beast bomb formed in the chakra construct's mouth, aimed not just at Arlong Park, but at the entire village. The real Nami screamed, "No, Naruto, don't. That's not the answer." She saw in that horrifying vision a reflection of her own desperate desire for salvation, twisted into an act of utter destruction. Power without understanding. She ran forward, not at Arlong, but at the vision of Naruto. "My strength isn't in escaping this place," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "It's in saving it. It's for Bell-Mir, for Genzo, for everyone." As she spoke, the vision of the rampaging Naruto wavered, and the phantom of Arlong dissolved into dust. The scene faded. They were now standing amidst flames and screams. Ohara. Robin fell to her knees, the memory a physical blow. She saw her mother on the shore, smiling at her, telling her to live. She saw the giant, laughing form of Saul holding her back, protecting her. Then, a new vision was offered to her. A glowing doorway appeared. "You can change it," a tempting whisper echoed in her mind. "Go back. Save them. You have the knowledge now. You can prevent the Buster Call. All it will cost you are the memories of a rubber boy and his foolish crew." Robin looked at the door, her heart aching with an impossible choice. To see her mother again, to save her home, it was everything she had ever wanted. But then she saw phantoms of Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and the others. Their faces fading. She saw herself at Eni's lobby, screaming that she wanted to live. Who had given her that chance? She turned her back on the door. "My past made me who I am," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "It led me to my nakama. I would not trade a single day with them, not even to undo my greatest sorrow." She looked at Naruto and Nami, who were standing with her, offering their silent support. "My place is with them." The fires of Ohara receded. Finally, they stood in the Valley of the End. Not the peaceful one Naruto had just left, but the site of his final cataclysmic battle with Sasuke. He saw himself lying on the ground, his arm gone, lying next to his best friend. The fight was over. The bond was saved. But then, the vision shifted. He was back in Konoha. He was the Hokage. A massive parade was being held in his honor. He was a hero, celebrated by all. But the faces of his friends, Sakura, Kakashi, Shikamaru, were distant. They had their own lives, their own families. He stood atop the Hokage monument, looking down at a village that adored him, and he had never felt more alone. The victory had cost him his purpose. "You can return," the Guardian's voice whispered. "This is your home, your destiny. These pirates, this sea, they are a diversion. You can go back." The temptation was a physical pain. The thought of his own ramen, his own bed, the familiar faces of his friends, it was a siren's call. But then he thought of the last few days. He thought of Zoro's challenge, of Sanji's arguments, of Luffy's idiotic, unwavering trust. He thought of Robin's brilliant mind lighting up as they worked together, and of Nami's fierce, protective spirit, the way she had stood against an army of agents for them. This new world was chaotic and strange, but in it, he had found something he hadn't even realized he was missing. A new fight, a new family, a new beginning. "A Hokage protects his village," Naruto said quietly, turning away from the vision of Konoha. "But these people, they're my precious people now, too. My home is where they are. My choice is to move forward, not back." The vision of the Valley of the End dissolved into soft, purple light. They were back on the island, standing before the silent, glowing guardians. Nami and Robin were looking at him, their eyes shining with unshed tears and a new, profound understanding. They had seen into each other's souls, witnessed the deepest pains that had forged them, You have chosen acceptance over regret. The voice of the guardians resonated with approval. You have chosen each other over your lonely pasts. You are worthy. A section of the white stone ruins behind them glowed and slid away, revealing a dark chamber. Inside, resting on a pedestal, was a single, massive poneglyph. Its surface shimmering with a faint, otherworldly light. The knowledge you seek is here. A piece of it. A warning. Robin stepped forward, her hands tracing the ancient characters, her voice a hushed, reverent whisper as she translated. It speaks of the void century, of the ancient kingdom. It says they did not fall to a terrestrial enemy, but to a foe who descended from the highest heaven. A false god, who could unmake destiny and impose a silent, perfect order. Naruto's blood ran cold. A silent, perfect order. He thought of Kageyama's calm fruit, of his cold, emotionless demeanor. Was it a coincidence? Robin continued, her voice growing more urgent. It says the ancient kingdom had a guardian of its own, a power that resonated with the very life of the world. The false god severed that connection. Her eyes met Naruto's. It warns that any power that draws on the world's natural energy, a power like your sage mode, it acts as a beacon. It is slowly, painstakingly, repairing that severed connection. It is awakening the echoes of the past. A new weight settled on them. Naruto's very presence in this world was a catalyst, a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for 800 years. He was not just a visitor. He was an agent of change, whether he wanted to be or not. They left the island, sailing back into the mists with a rubbing of the poneglyph. The three of them stood at the bow of the Sunny, watching the twilight paradise of Vital disappear behind them. A new, unspoken bond connected them. They had walked through the fire of each other's pasts and had come out the other side, not burned, but forged together. Nami reached out, her hand finding his. On his other side, Robin did the same. It wasn't a gesture of romance, not yet, but of something deeper. It was a promise, a shared burden. They were in this together, facing not just the world government, but the ghosts of the world itself. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Celestial's Gaze. The days that followed their departure from the phantom island of Vital were deceptively calm. The 1,000 Sunny sailed on a gentle, turquoise sea under a sky of brilliant, cloudless blue. The rhythm of life aboard the ship returned to its familiar cadence. Luffy, with Chopper perched on his head, cast his fishing line off the bow, his laughter echoing across the water. Zoro's grunts and the clang of his weights provided a steady percussion from the observation deck. The rich, tantalizing aroma of Sanji's cooking wafted from the galley, a promise of comfort and culinary genius. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, something had irrevocably shifted. The poneglyph's message had been a stone dropped into a still pond, and the ripples were only now reaching the shore. The crew spoke in more hushed tones, their conversations now laced with words like void century and false god. An unspoken gravity had settled over them, the weight of a history they were only just beginning to comprehend. The change was most palpable among the three who had faced the trial. Naruto, Nami, and Robin now shared a bond forged in the crucible of memory and pain. They sought each other's company, finding a silent understanding in a shared glance or a quiet moment by the railing. They had looked into the abyss of each other's pasts and had not recoiled. It was an intimacy that transcended friendship, an alliance of souls. One afternoon, Naruto found Nami on the upper deck, her drawing table set up, surrounded by blank charts. She wasn't drawing, however. She was simply staring at the endless horizon, her charcoal pencil held loosely in her fingers. He walked over and leaned on the railing beside her, following her gaze. "It's bigger than I ever imagined," Nami said, her voice barely a whisper. This world, before, it was just a map to be drawn, a challenge to be conquered. Now, it feels like every league we cross, we're sailing deeper into a secret. A dangerous one. All the best secrets are, Robin said. Joining them, she held a book, but her attention was also on the sea. It's not just a map you're drawing, Nami. It's a story. And now, we are a part of it. Naruto looked. Between the two of them, the fiery navigator who charted the future and the serene archaeologist who deciphered the past. He, the impossible present, stood between them. Whatever this story is, he said, his voice firm. We'll see it through to the end. Together. Nami's fingers tightened on her pencil, and a determined glint returned to her eyes. Robin closed her book, a soft, confident smile on her lips. In that moment, they were not just three friends, they were a fulcrum upon which the world's fate might pivot. It was Usopp who spotted the island. It was a tiny, insignificant speck of land, little more than a pile of sun-bleached rock and pale sand that jutted from the ocean like a broken tooth. "Let's stop," Luffy yelled, reeling in his line, which had, as usual, caught a discarded boot. "I wanna stretch my legs. Let's have a picnic." The idea of a simple, normal picnic felt like a lifeline, a chance to reclaim a piece of the carefree adventure they seemed to be losing. They anchored the Sunny in the shallow, crystalline water and waded ashore, carrying baskets of food and blankets. The island was utterly barren. There was no vegetation, no sign of life, just the sun, the sand, and the sea. It was peaceful, and then it wasn't. It began with the silence. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore ceased. The cry of a distant gull was cut off mid-squawk. The wind died, the air becoming unnaturally still and heavy, pressing down on them with a physical weight. Zoro, who had been about to start his training, froze, his hand dropping to his swords. Sanji, in the middle of lighting a cigarette, stopped. The flame from his lighter unwavering, frozen in time. "What is this?" Nami whispered, the sound unnervingly loud in the absolute quiet. An immense pressure descended, a feeling of being watched by something vast and ancient. It was a presence that dwarfed anything Naruto had ever felt, a cosmic arrogance that made the world itself seem to hold its breath in fear. They all looked up. High in the perfect, empty blue sky, a speck of gold appeared. It grew larger, descending with a slow, regal grace. It was a throne, ornate and massive, crafted from what looked like solid gold and mother of pearl. It floated on the air as if the laws of physics were a mere suggestion it had chosen to ignore. Seated on the throne was a figure. He wore the traditional, eel robes and the upturned glass bubble helmet of a world noble. But his attire was immaculate, woven with threads of pure gold that shimmered in the sun. He looked young, with smooth, alabaster skin and fine, silver blonde hair. He was beautiful, like a marble statue of a forgotten deity. But his eyes, visible through the clear bubble, were chillingly empty. They held no malice, no anger, no joy. They held nothing but the cold, placid emptiness of the void. The throne came to a silent stop 20 feet above the sand. The celestial dragon looked down upon them, his expression one of mild, detached curiosity. Like a man observing an interesting insect colony. "The Straw Hat Pirates," he said. His voice was not projected through a speaker, nor did it seem to come from his mouth. It simply was, appearing in their minds, calm, melodic, and utterly devoid of emotion. And the anomaly. How convenient to find you all gathered in one place. It saves one the trouble of plucking weeds from all corners of the garden. Luffy stepped forward, his fists clenched, his usual grin replaced by a hard, angry line. "Who are you, and what did you do to the ocean?" The celestial dragon's lips curved into a faint, pitying smile. "I am Saint Icarus, and I have done nothing to the ocean. I have simply asked it to be still while I work. The world is a garden, you see. My garden. I am its tender. I prune the branches that grow wild. I pull the weeds that threaten the harmony of my perfect design. And you, pirates, you are the most unruly of weeds." "Perfect design," Zoro growled, drawing one of his swords. "The world is chaos. That's what makes it worth living." "Ah, the swordsman. Roronoa Zoro," Icarus said, his gaze drifting to him. "You seek to become the world's greatest. A noble, if foolish, ambition. I have seen the thread of your fate. It does not end on a throne of glory. It ends in the dirt, your swords broken, your body shattered by a man you will never, ever be able to surpass. Your dream is a dead end." Zoro's eye twitched, but his grip on his sword didn't waver. Icarus's gaze shifted. "Vinsmoke Sanji, you search for a mythical sea, the all-blue. And you will find it. I have seen this as well. You will find it at the end of your long and painful journey. A dead sea, devoid of life, where all the oceans, currents go to die. Your dream is not a treasure, it is a tomb." Sanji's cigarette fell from his lips. His face pale. The celestial dragon's empty eyes finally settled on their captain. "And Monkey D. Luffy, the king of the pirates. A title you will indeed achieve. You will stand on Raftel. You will find the One Piece, and you will be king. But the throne will be made of the bones of your friends. Your journey to the top will be the direct cause of their demise. You will be a king of ash and regret, alone in a world you broke to achieve a childish fantasy. Luffy's body began to tremble with rage. Shut up, he hissed. Icarus sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Words are not enough for the truly stubborn. Your wills are strong, I will grant you that. You require a demonstration. His gaze sharpened, and he focused on Nami and Robin. He saw them as the nexus, the emotional anchors tethering the anomaly to this crew. He would not just break them, he would unravel them. Let us start with the little thief who wishes to map the world, he said, his voice soft and cruel. Nami cried out. The world around her dissolved. The sun-drenched beach was gone, replaced by the smoke-choked streets of a burning village. It was Kokoyasi, but older, ravaged by war. She saw herself, her face lined with age and despair, clutching a stack of half-finished maps. A new generation of pirates, more brutal and savage than Arlong's, rampaged through her home, their laughter a symphony of cruelty. She saw Genzo fall, trying to defend the tangerine groves. She saw Nojiko dragged away, screaming her name. This was her future. Her selfish dream to map the world had kept her at sea for too long. Leaving her home undefended, her quest hadn't saved them, it had doomed them. A bottomless, crushing guilt consumed her, and she fell to her knees, screaming. Now, the demon, Icarus intoned, his attention shifting. Robin's world went black. She found herself on a windswept, desolate island. The sky was perpetually gray. Around her were hundreds of poneglyphs, a forest of indestructible stone. She had done it. She had found the Rio poneglyph. The true history of the world was laid bare before her. But there was no one left to tell. The world government had won. The revolution had failed. Her friends were long dead. The world had forgotten the Void Century, forgotten Ohara, forgotten her. She was the last scholar, a ghost haunting a library no one would ever visit. Her life's work a collection of secrets that would die with her. The ultimate, absolute loneliness she had feared her entire life settled over her like a shroud, and a silent, broken sob escaped her lips. The crew watched in horror as Nami and Robin collapsed, trapped in waking nightmares, their bodies thrashing in the sand. What did you do to them? Chopper shrieked, rushing towards them. I have shown them the truth. Icarus said simply, the inevitable end of their chosen paths. This is the power of the Kami Kami no Mi model, Icarus. I do not predict the future. I read the story that is already written. I am the custodian of destiny. He then turned his full, chilling attention to the blond man who stood watching him, his blue eyes blazing with a cold fury. And you, Icarus said, a flicker of genuine distaste in his voice. The anomaly, the loose thread in my perfect tapestry. I look at your fate, and I see nothing. You do not belong here. You are a mistake, a flaw in creation that must be erased. Icarus focused his power, intending to show this anomaly a future of such despair it would shatter his soul. But he hit a wall. It was not a physical barrier, but a will of such ferocious, stubborn intensity that it refused to be read. It was a will forged in a lifetime of defying fate. Naruto's eyes snapped open, the pupils now horizontal bars. The orange pigmentation of sage mode flared around them like a burning sunset. He could feel it now. The unnatural energy of the celestial dragon, a web of cold, oppressive power that was suffocating the world, strangling the life force of his friends. Destiny, Naruto growled, his voice low and dangerous. He took a step forward, the sand crunching under his feet. You don't know the first thing about destiny. He didn't charge. He didn't form a Rasengan. He stood his ground and spoke, his voice ringing with the power of absolute conviction. I was born with a monster inside me. The whole world decided my destiny for me before I could even walk. I was supposed to be a pariah, a weapon, a thing to be feared and hated. There was a prophecy that said I would either save the world or destroy it. He pointed a trembling finger at the god on the throne. But a prophecy is just a story someone else wants you to live. I tore that story to pieces. I made friends with the monster inside me. I fought my best friend and brought him back from the darkness. I became the hero of my village not because it was my destiny, but because I never, ever gave up. He roared, the sound raw and powerful. A person's fate isn't a thread you can read in a book. It's a path you carve with your own two hands. His will, amplified by the natural energy of the world, erupted from him like a shockwave. It wasn't an attack, it was a declaration. A fundamental truth that was so powerful it pushed back against the oppressive silence of Icarus's power. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his very spirit, forcing his way into the nightmares that had ensnared his friends. He found Nami in the heart of her burning village, weeping over the ashes of her dream. He stood beside her, not as a phantom, but as a solid, warm presence. Your dream isn't a weakness, Nami, he said, his voice gentle but firm. It's your strength. It's the reason you can read the sea like no one else. It's the reason you saved us 100 times over. This future isn't real, it's a lie made from your fear. The real future is the one you're going to draw for us. He found Robin in her lonely library of stone, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He walked up to the Rio poneglyph and placed a hand on its cold surface. So this is it, the true history, he asked. Then you'd better start memorizing it. Because you're going to tell it to all of us. You're not alone, Robin. You have us. We'll carry that history with you. We'll make the world listen. His unwavering belief, his absolute refusal to accept their despair, was a light in their private darkness. It was the key they needed to unlock their own prisons. On the beach, Nami and Robin gasped, their eyes flying open. The visions shattered, receding like a nightmare at dawn. They were trembling, tears staining their faces. But their eyes were clear. They looked at Naruto, who stood between them and the god in the sky, a shield of pure, indomitable will. Saint Icarus stared down, his serene composure finally cracking. A flicker of genuine shock, and something akin to annoyance, crossed his features. No one had ever defied his visions. No one had ever rejected their own, inevitable fate. Curious, he said, his voice losing its melodic quality, taking on a sharper, colder edge. A weed that thinks it can choose where it grows. This is a more problematic infestation than I had anticipated. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, saw him not as a simple anomaly, but as a contagion, a chaotic principle that could unravel his entire perfect world. This world is a garden, not a wilderness, Icarus stated. His throne beginning to rise. And I am its gardener. The next time we meet, anomaly, I will bring my shears. The golden throne ascended, shrinking into a speck of light before vanishing into the blue. The moment it was gone, the world rushed back in. The waves began to lap at the shore again. The wind picked up, cool and salty. The oppressive silence was gone, but the chilling memory of it remained. The crew rushed to Nami and Robin, helping them up. They were shaken, but they were whole. They stood close to Naruto, their shoulders brushing, their presence a silent thank you. Luffy, who had been watching the entire exchange with a rare and deadly seriousness, cracked his knuckles, the sound like gunshots in the quiet aftermath. He stared at the spot in the sky where the throne had disappeared. I don't care about fate, he declared, his voice low and hard. I'm going to be king of the pirates. And anyone who says otherwise. He looked at his crew, his friends, his family, and a fierce, protective fire burned in his eyes. I'm gonna kick their ass. The picnic was forgotten. They stood on the barren island, no longer just a crew of dreamers on a grand adventure. They were rebels in a war they hadn't known they were fighting. A war against the god who claimed to have already written their ending. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Summit of Kings. The memory of Saint Icarus, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, clung to the thousand sunny long after his golden throne vanished into the sky. The sheer audacity of a man who claimed to govern destiny, who casually revealed the crushing end of their dreams, had left an indelible mark. The celebratory mood was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering anger and a profound sense of urgency. The vast, blue sea, once an expanse of boundless freedom, now felt like a stage, its currents steered by unseen hands, its stories already written. Nami, usually the first to recover her spirits after a setback, was unusually subdued. She sat at her drawing table, but the map remained blank. Robin, ever the pragmatist, was in the library, her fingers tracing the ancient script of the poneglyph rubbing from vital, cross-referencing it with her own notes. Luffy, for once, was silent, perched on the Sunny's lion head, staring at the horizon with an intensity that brooked no interruption. Naruto found them there, feeling the weight of the silence. He understood it. He knew what it felt like to have your future dictated, to be told your hopes were foolish. But he also knew the liberating power of defiance. He's a liar, Naruto stated, his voice cutting through the heavy air. He stood between Nami and Robin, a silent anchor. He just wants you to give up. He wants to control you. Nami finally looked up, her eyes still haunted. But what if he's not lying, Naruto? What if that really is our future? All the risks, all the sacrifices, just to die, broken and alone. Robin closed her book, her expression uncharacteristically grim. The poneglyph on Vital spoke of a false god who could unmake destiny. His power is real, Nami. The question is not if he speaks the truth of a possible future, but either we allow him to make that future absolute. She looked at Naruto. Your insight into prophecies, it is invaluable. How do we fight someone who claims to have already won? Naruto looked from Nami's fear to Robin's stoicism. He thought of his own long fight against the shadow of his fate, against Kagaya, against the very concept of a predetermined future. You don't fight a prophecy with another prophecy, he said, his voice firm. You fight it by living your own life, by making your own choices. By breaking the story they wrote for you. And to do that, you need to be stronger. Not just in power, but in purpose. And you need information. Luffy, who had been listening, suddenly slammed his fist into the deck. He said he'd break my friends. He said he'd make me a king of bones. His voice was a low growl, filled with a dangerous resolve. He stood up, turning to face them. We're not letting him do that. We're going to be free. And to do that, we need to talk to Shanks. The name hung in the air, a beacon in the storm. Shanks, the red-haired pirate, one of the 4 emperors of the sea. Luffy's idol, the man who had inspired his journey. The one man in the Grand Line who might possess the wisdom and the reach to understand a threat like Saint Icarus. Shanks, Nami exclaimed, surprised. But he's a Yonko. His territory is deep in the New World. It's incredibly dangerous just to get there. Danger doesn't matter, Luffy declared, his usual boundless optimism infused with a new, fierce determination. He's strong. He knows things. And he'll help us. Robin nodded slowly. Luffy-kun is right. Shanks is one of the few who has navigated the intricacies of the world's true powers for decades. If anyone can shed light on this, Kami no Mi, and the Celestial Dragon's true capabilities, it would be him. The decision was made. The Thousand Sunny changed course, setting a new trajectory into the heart of the New World. The journey was a constant, nerve-wracking test. The New World lived up to its reputation. The weather was even more unpredictable, with islands appearing and disappearing, and the magnetic fields going wild, forcing Nami to rely on pure instinct and the occasional frantic readings from her log pose. But it was the other pirates who truly defined the danger. Unlike the relatively contained battles of the Grand Line, the New World was a brutal, Arwinian struggle for territory and dominance. They encountered the remnants of crews shattered by Yonko clashes, ghostly ships drifting with their dead. They saw massive, monstrous sea kings that dwarfed any they had ever encountered. Naruto, keeping a constant, low-level sage mode active, felt the sheer density of powerful presences around them. It was a world teeming with monsters, both human and natural. He also sensed something else, a faint, resonant hum that pulsed beneath the ocean, a distant echo of the ancient power they had discovered on Vital. It seemed to grow subtly stronger the deeper they ventured into these uncharted waters, as if something ancient was indeed stirring, drawn by his presence. One afternoon, as they sailed through a particularly misty stretch of sea, the alarm bells rang. Ship approaching fast, port side, Usopp yelled from the crow's nest, his telescope trained on a large, sleek vessel adorned with menacing skull motifs. It's the Blood Serpent, pirates. Captain Scratchman Apu's crew. Quote, a ripple of tension went through the crew. Scratchman Apu, a notorious supernova with a bounty north of 400 million belly, was known for his bizarre musical devil fruit powers and his unpredictable, chaotic nature. He was not a foe to be taken lightly. Looks like they found us first, Zoro grunted, 3 swords already at his side. Apu himself appeared on the prow of his ship, his long arms extended, his body a living instrument. Yoo-hoo, Straw Hats, heard you got a new toy. A golden hero, was it? Show yourselves. His voice, naturally distorted by his devil fruit, was a cacophony of scratching, drums, and high-pitched cymbal crashes. Don't let his music hit you, Nami warned, assembling her klima tact. It's all part of his attacks. Apu's ship closed the distance quickly, his crew preparing to board. Let's get this party started. Sha Anna Nana, his body became a giant amplifier, and a deafening wave of sound, imbued with cutting force, erupted from him, slicing through the air towards the sunny. Gum gum, giant balloon. Luffy inflated, deflecting the invisible slashes. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Naruto slammed his palms together, and a massive gust of wind, infused with chakra, erupted from the sunny, meeting Apu's sound wave head-on. The two forces collided, creating a violent disturbance in the air, canceling each other out. Apu's eyes widened in surprise. Whoa, new move. That your new guy, Straw Hat? He ain't bad. He grinned, his long arms stretching. Let's see how he handles a full concert. His crew swarmed the sunny, a chaotic horde armed with axes, swords, and strange musical instruments that also served as weapons. The Straw Hats met them head-on. Luffy unleashed Gear Second, blurring across the deck like a red comet. Zoro was a whirlwind of steel, his three blades cutting a path through the enemy. Sanji danced through the fray, his diable hombi kicks sending pirates flying. Frankie's fists were pistons of destruction, and Brook's rapier moved with the elegance of a deadly waltz. Chopper, in heavy point, was a furry tank. Naruto, however, noticed something else. Apu wasn't just attacking with sound. He was using it to manipulate his environment. He could make the very air vibrate, creating invisible walls of force, or cause the deck to become slippery with a distorted bass note. It was a subtle, insidious power that disrupted their movements and threw off their balance. His music is messing with my footing. Zoro grunted, stumbling as a low bass note made the deck beneath him tremble. It's disorienting, Nami yelled, dodging a cymbal crash that manifested as a physical shockwave. I can't get a clear read on the wind. Naruto made a quick assessment. Apu's ability was like a wide-area genjutsu, a sensory manipulation that turned the battlefield into a weapon. He needed to cut off the source. Robin, Nami, get ready, Naruto shouted over the din. He made a hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Two clones appeared beside him. You two, defensive perimeter. Protect the ship. The clones immediately moved, forming a barrier of wind and chakra that deflected incoming attacks. The original Naruto turned to Nami and Robin. His sound attacks spread through the air. If we can disrupt the air around him, we can mess with his aim. Nami's eyes lit up. You mean like a localized maelstrom? Exactly. Naruto grinned. I'll give you the wind. You give it the juice. Robin, meanwhile, had noticed a pattern in Apu's movements. He was constantly shifting, using his long arms to create different sonic attacks. He telegraphs his major attacks with specific poses. She yelled. If we can predict his movements, Nami, you can time your strikes. Naruto focused. He entered sage mode, not fully, but enough to heighten his senses and draw in a burst of natural energy. He took a deep breath, molding chakra. Futon. Atsugai. Wind style. Pressure damage. A focused blast of incredibly dense, high-pressure wind erupted from his palm, not aimed at Apu, but directly around him, creating a turbulent, chaotic vortex of air. Apu reeled back, his music stuttering. His attacks, usually precise, now went wild, harmlessly exploding in the turbulent air. Hey, what the? My sound waves are getting scattered. Now, Nami, Robin yelled, pointing a multi-armed hand at the struggling Apu. He's about to hit a drum beat. High frequency. Nami, empowered by Naruto's constant flow of wind chakra, slammed her klima tact into the turbulent air. Thunder breed tempo. The super charged wind from Naruto created a perfect conduit. A massive bolt of lightning, crackling with raw electrical power, snaked through the chaotic air directly into Apu. Kaboom! Apu shrieked, his body becoming a conduit for the immense electrical discharge. He twitched and spasmed, falling to the deck of his ship in a smoking heap. His crew, demoralized by the sudden defeat of their captain and the overwhelming synergy of the Straw Hats, began to retreat. That was super. Frankie cheered, punching the air. Nice one, Nami Swan, Robin-chan. Sanji yelled, blowing them a kiss. The battle ended as quickly as it began. Another supernova crew sent packing with a healthy dose of respect and fear for the Straw Hats and their golden new ally. Naruto looked at Nami and Robin, a genuine smile on his face. Their teamwork had been flawless. They were adapting to his abilities, and he was learning to trust theirs. Days later, the Thousand Sunny approached an island shrouded in a perpetual twilight. Its sky painted with hues of deep violet and indigo. Massive, ancient trees with glowing leaves dotted the landscape, and a colossal, weathered skull carved into a mountain face loomed in the distance. This was a legendary outpost in the New World, a place where the red-haired pirates held court. As they drew closer, they saw it, a massive, red-haired Jolly Roger fluttering proudly from a mast on the island's highest peak. And then, a small, unassuming fishing boat emerged from a hidden cove, its occupants waving. Straw Hats, you actually made it, a booming voice called out. It was Yasop, the red-haired pirate's marksman. His usual easygoing smile now tinged with genuine excitement. The Sunny docked in a hidden bay, greeted by a small contingent of red-haired pirates. The atmosphere was immediately different from the tense encounters they'd had. These were strong men, their presence radiating power, but it was a power tempered by a relaxed confidence. They were welcoming, laughing, clapping Luffy on the back. Luffy, however, had little time for pleasantries. He spotted Shanks, sitting on a weathered crate, a bottle of sake in his hand, a warm smile on his face. He hadn't changed much since Luffy had last seen him, still possessing that easygoing charm and a quiet, formidable presence. Shanks, Luffy yelled, scrambling off the ship before the gangplank was even fully deployed. He rushed towards his idol, his usual boisterous energy momentarily subdued by a raw, uncharacteristic seriousness. Shanks simply smiled, setting down his bottle. His single visible eye, sharp and intelligent, met Luffy's. He saw the fire in the young man's gaze, but he also saw the shadow that had settled there since their last meeting. He then looked past Luffy, to the new, unfamiliar figure stepping onto the island. Naruto stood on the shore, the rest of the Straw Hats assembling behind him. He looked at Shanks, feeling the sheer, overwhelming presence of the Yonko. Shanks was strong, incredibly so. But it wasn't an aggressive strength. It was a deep, rooted power, like an ancient tree. And his gaze, it was perceptive, taking in everything, missing nothing. He looked at Naruto not with surprise, but with an almost knowing curiosity, as if he had been expecting him. You've grown, Luffy, Shanks said, his voice warm, a smile playing on his lips. He then looked at Naruto, his smile widening slightly. And it seems you've acquired quite the fascinating companion. He raised his sake bottle in a silent toast. Welcome to the New World, Naruto Uzumaki. You carry a unique scent. A scent of defiance. It tells me you have a story I very much want to hear. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Price of Knowledge. The night on Shanks Island was a living thing, a symphony of roaring bonfires, raucous sea shanties, and the percussive clash of overflowing sake cups. The red-haired pirates, masters of their domain, knew how to celebrate. It was a chaotic, joyous affair, a brief, defiant stand against the grim realities of the New World. Luffy and Shanks sat side by side, not as mentor and student, but as equals, engaged in a gargantuan eating contest that threatened to deplete the island's entire food supply. Usopp found a kindred spirit in his father, Yasop, the two trading unbelievable stories that grew more fantastic with every drink. Naruto sat slightly apart from the main throng, a cup of sake held loosely in his hands, observing. He watched Ben Beckman, Shanks' first mate, engage Zoro in a quiet, intense conversation about swordsmanship, a silent respect passing between the two men. He saw Sanji in a heated, yet friendly, debate with the cruise chef about the merits of North Blue spices. He felt the easy camaraderie, the unshakable loyalty that bound these monstrously powerful men together. It reminded him of Konoha, of the bonds forged in the fires of countless missions. For the first time since arriving in this strange, waterlogged world, the Echo Loneliness in his chest began to subside, replaced by a fragile warmth. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Shanks, who had somehow extricated himself from the eating contest. The Yonko sat down, his single arm resting on his knee, his gaze fixed on the fire. "You're a long way from home, Naruto Uzumaki," Shanks said, his voice a low rumble beneath the noise of the party. "It wasn't a question. You have no idea," Naruto replied, taking a sip of the strong rice wine. "Your presence here," Shanks continued, his eyes sharp and perceptive, "it feels like a stone tossed into a still pond. The ripples are spreading faster and further than you can imagine." He looked directly at Naruto, his gaze cutting through all pretense. "This celestial dragon you met, Saint Icarus. I have heard whispers of him. A ghost story told among the old guard. A world noble who never leaves Mary Geoise, one of the few who holds a national treasure of their own, a devil fruit of godlike power." Robin and Nami, sensing the shift in tone, quietly joined them, their expressions serious. "We found a poneglyph," Robin said, her voice low. "It spoke of a false god who could unmake destiny, and who evered the world's connection to its own life force, its natural energy." Shanks' expression grew grim. "So the old stories are true." He took a long drink of sake. "The world government has many secrets, but the deepest, darkest ones are tied to the void century. The Kami no Mi, the god fruits. They are myths, said to be the source of the world noble's power. If Icarus possesses one, he is more dangerous than all the admirals and the entire cipher pole combined. His ability is not to fight, but to erase. He can pluck a person from the tapestry of fate, and it's as if they never existed." "So how do we fight him?" Nami asked, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and determination. "How do you fight someone who can decide you've already lost?" Shanks was silent for a long moment, staring into the dancing flames. "You can't outpunch fate," he said finally. "But you can refuse to play its game. Icarus's power relies on the world being a certain way, a story that follows his script. Naruto." He turned his gaze back to him. "Your sage mode, your ability to touch the world's natural energy, you are an error in his story. You are a verse of a song he has never heard. You are, in effect, a walking, breathing contradiction to his power." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I cannot give you a weapon to defeat him. But I can point you to a place that holds the knowledge you need. There is an island in the far north of the New World, a place sailors call the Isle of Echoes. It is not on any map. It is a place of memory, a repository of the world's deepest truths and sorrows. The knowledge there is not free. The island demands a price from all who would seek its wisdom." "What kind of price?" Naruto asked, his shinobi senses on high alert. Shanks' expression was somber. "A piece of yourself. It is said the island requires a sacrifice to unlock its secrets. Not of blood, but of the heart. A cherished memory." A cold dread washed over the trio. To give up Emery, it was a violation more profound than any physical wound. Following Shanks' cryptic directions, they sailed for 3 days through a sea of unnerving silence. The water was as still as glass, reflecting a sky the color of a fading bruise. The Isle of Echoes rose from the sea not as a landmass, but as a monument to sorrow. It was a single, colossal spire of black, crystalline rock that seemed to absorb the light. Surrounded by smaller, jagged spires that looked like petrified screams. There were no beaches, no vegetation, only the silent, black stone. As they approached, a low, melancho lick hum vibrated through the hull of the Sunny, a sound that resonated deep within their chests. They docked the ship at a small, unnatural-looking inlet, the only break in the island's sheer cliffs. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Usopp mumbled, his knees knocking together. "Luffy, you and the others stay with the ship," Naruto said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The warning was specific. "This is a trial of the heart. Brute force won't work here." He looked at Nami and Robin. They both nodded, their faces pale but resolute. They had faced their pasts on Vital, they would face this together as well. The 3 of them stepped onto the black rock. It was cold to the touch, and the air was still and frigid. As they walked towards the central spire, the hum grew louder, colossi ing into a chorus of disembodied whispers, the echoes of countless forgotten souls. The whispers spoke not to their ears, but to their minds. Knowledge has a weight. Truth has a cost. The heart is a vault of treasures, each one a link in the chain of your soul. To learn what has been lost, you must offer up what you hold most dear. A memory, a single, perfect moment. Give it to the island, and the path will be opened. But know this, the memory will not be merely forgotten. It will be erased from your very being, as if it never was. In front of them, the face of the spire shimmered, and 3 archways of faint, shimmering light appeared. They were not entrances, but mirrors, and in them, they saw not their reflections, but visions. Nami found herself standing under a tangerine tree, the sun warm on her skin. Belle was there, alive and vibrant, ruffling her hair. "Don't you ever touch my daughter's maps." Belle was laughing, that fierce, loving laugh that was the bedrock of Nami's world. It was a perfect, sun-drenched memory, a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness before Arlong, before the darkness. This moment, the island whispered in her mind. It is a source of great joy, but also of great pain. It is the memory of what you lost. Surrender it. You will forget her death. You will forget the years of torment. You will be free of the burden of her sacrifice. You will only remember the love. Is that not a small price for peace? The temptation was a physical thing, a sweet poison that promised to soothe the oldest, deepest ache in her soul. To live without the constant, stabbing guilt, without the memory of that final, terrible day. She looked over and saw Robin, lost in her own vision. Robin was a child again, in the great library of Ohara. Her mother, Nico Aldia, was leaning over her, a rare, gentle smile on her face as she helped Robin decipher a difficult passage. "You are a true scholar, my daughter," Aldia's voice echoed, filled with a love Robin had only known for a fleeting moment. It was a memory of belonging, of purpose, of a mother's pride. "This pride is your life's quest," the island whispered to Robin. "But the memory of its loss is your heaviest chain. Give it to us. You will forget the fire. You will forget the loneliness. You will forget the faces of those who died screaming your name. You will be free to pursue the true history not as a desperate survivor, but as a pure academic. A worthy sacrifice for true knowledge." Robin's hands clenched into fists. To be free of the nightmares, of the faces that haunted her every waking moment. It was a release she had craved for 20 years. Naruto's vision was not of warmth, but of rain and blood. He was lying on the ground in the Valley of the End, his right arm a mangled stump. Beside him, Sasuke lay in a similar state, his left arm gone. The cataclysmic battle was over. The years of chasing, of fighting, of desperate pleading, had come to this. Sasuke's eyes, cleared of the curse of hatred for the first time in years, met his. "I lose," Sasuke admitted, a faint, weary smile on his lips. It wasn't a memory of victory. It was a memory of shared, absolute exhaustion, of a bond orged in the crucible of mutual destruction. It was the moment he had finally, truly gotten his brother back. This bond was bought with immense pain, the island whispered to him. "You nearly died. Your world nearly ended. Surrender the memory of the fight. You can keep the friendship, the reconciliation. Just give us the pain, the struggle, the blood. You will be left with only the prize, not the cost." A hero should not have to carry such ugly scars. To have Sasuke back without the horrifying memory of their near-fatal clash. To have the brotherhood without the blood. It was a seductive lie, a promise of a clean, painless victory. They stood there for an eternity, each trapped in their own perfect, poisoned temptation. They could see each other, their faces etched with agony, their internal struggles laid bare. Nami saw the temptation in Robin's eyes, the deep desire to let go of her burden. Robin saw the conflict in Naruto's, the allure of a past without its sharpest edges. Naruto saw the raw pain in Nami's, the chance to erase the trauma that had defined her. And in seeing each other's struggle, they found their own strength. Nami was the first to speak, her voice trembling but clear. "No." She looked at the vision of her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Belle Mare's sacrifice, the pain of losing her, it's what makes me who I am. It's why I fight for my friends. It's why I'll buy back my village. To forget it would be to dishonor her. To throw away her gift. I will never give you this memory." The vision of Belle Mere smiled with pride, and then faded. Robin looked at the specter of her mother, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "My burden is not a chain," she said, her voice regaining its quiet strength. "It is a promise. I live for the scholars of Ohara. I carry their will. To forget their faces, to forget their sacrifice, would be a betrayal far worse than death. My loneliness is the price of their memory, and I will pay it gladly." The library of Ohara dissolved into light. Naruto looked at the bloody image of himself and Sasuke, and he shook his head. "The pain is the point," he growled, his voice thick with emotion. "Our bond isn't real without it. The struggle, the fight, the blood we spilled, that's what makes our friendship worth the damn. It's proof that we fought for it, that we earned it. You can't have the prize without the cost." The valley of the end vanished. The three archways of light dissolved, and the humming of the island quieted. A new light emanated from the face of the spire, soft and white. The whispers were gone, replaced by a single, clear, ancient voice that resonated with profound respect. "You have chosen the weight of your hearts over the ease of forgetting. You have proven that your pasts are your anchors, not your chains. You are worthy." The stone face of the spire became translucent, revealing a chamber within. Floating in the center of the chamber was a swirling sphere of pure, white energy, pulsing like a star. It was not a poneglyph. It was raw information, a living memory of the world itself. As they stepped into the chamber, the sphere pulsed, and the knowledge flooded their minds. They saw a vision of the world as it was centuries ago, teeming with a vibrant natural energy. They saw the arrival of the false gods, beings who fed on that energy, who imposed their silent order by making the world forget its own song. They learned that the Kami Kami no Mi was not a fruit, but a parasite, a tool that allowed its user to literally drain the world's life force to power their reality-warping abilities. Saint Icarus wasn't just reading fate, he was actively consuming the world's energy to enforce his vision of it. And then came the final, chilling revelation. The awakening of the Sentient power was the world itself fighting back, its dormant life force being stirred by Naruto's presence. He was like a defibrillator to a dying heart. But the process was dangerous. If the world's energy returned too quickly, without a guide, it could shatter the fragile balance of the world, causing cataclysms on an unimaginable scale. They now knew Icarus's weakness, the very power Naruto wielded. But they also knew the terrifying stakes. To defeat him, they had to reawaken a power that could save the world or tear it apart. They left the Isle of Echoes as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. They stood on the deck of the Sunny, the black spire receding behind them, the weight of their new knowledge heavy on their shoulders. They had given up nothing, and in doing so, had gained everything. Nami and Robin stood on either side of Naruto, watching the dawn. The trial had stripped them bare, and in that vulnerability, they had found a new, unbreakable strength. Nami reached out and took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. On his other side, Robin did the same. It was a simple, silent gesture that spoke volumes. The shared ordeal, the refusal to surrender the memories that defined them, had been the final catalyst. The respect, the admiration, the deep, empathetic bond had finally, quietly, blossomed into love. They were no longer just allies. They were a unit, three parts of a whole, bound by a shared past, a terrifying present, and an uncertain future they would face as one. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Siege of Judgment's Gate. The No.W.L. edge from the Isle of Echoes was a cold, heavy anchor in their minds. Saint Icarus was not just a foe with a strange ability, he was a parasite, draining the world's life force to enforce his sterile, perfect order. And Naruto, with his sage mode, was the unintentional catalyst for the world's rebellion, a rebellion that could shatter the very foundations of the sea if left unchecked. They were no longer just fighting for their dreams. They were fighting for the world's right to have a soul. Their path forward was uncertain. How could they fight a god without unleashing a cataclysm? The answer, Robin had theorized, lay in more knowledge, in the poneglyphs. They needed the complete true history to understand the nature of the ancient power and how to control it. A week after leaving the Isle of Echoes, a sliver of hope appeared. They intercepted a coded marine transmission, one Robin, with her newfound understanding of ancient ciphers, managed to partially decrypt. It spoke of a historical acid of Oharan significance, being transferred to a new, state-of-the-art secure facility in the New World, Marine Fortress GX, codenamed Judgment's Gate. It could be a trap. Nami's Navigot, Or's intuition screamed that the currents around the coordinates felt wrong, manipulated. Sanji argued it was too convenient. But the mere possibility of a poneglyph, of another piece of the puzzle, was a lure they couldn't ignore. If it's a trap, Luffy said, his expression set with a grim determination they had all come to recognize, we'll smash it. If there's a poneglyph there, we'll take it. Either way, we're going in. Judgment's Gate was a monument to the world government's arrogance. It was a cluster of colossal, black sea stacks, jagged and menacing, connected by a web of iron bridges and fortified walls. At its heart was a central keep that towered into the perpetually stormy sky above, bristling with cannons of a new, advanced design. It was Eni's lobby reborn, but bigger, meaner, and built with the singular purpose of being an inescapable fortress. As the thousand sunnies sailed into the narrow channel leading to the main gate, the trap was sprung. With a groan of tortured metal, a massive iron gate, 20 stories high, slammed down behind them, sealing the entrance. Simultaneously, from the depths of the churning sea, vast nets woven with seastone chainlink rose, creating a cage that would sap the strength of any devil fruit user who touched them. Alarms blared, thousands of marine soldiers appeared on the walls, and every cannon on every tower swiveled to aim at the lone pirate ship. On the bridge of the central keep, a man stood watching, a grotesque smile twisting his features. His face was a patchwork of scars, his body augmented with crude, powerful cybernetics. And his original 6 arms had been replaced by 8 gleaming, metallic appendages, each tipped with a variety of cruel-looking weapons. Vice Admiral Onagumo, remade and consumed by vengeance, tasted the moment. So, the golden maelstrom has sailed into my web, he hissed, his voice a metallic rasp. He humiliated me, he destroyed my career, but the world government gave me a second chance. They gave me this fortress. They gave me these new toys. He gestured to the cannons. Fire the chakra seal, barrage. Show them the meaning of true justice. The cannons fired, but they didn't launch iron balls. They unleashed clouds of fine, gray dust that rained down on the sunny. The moment the dust touched Naruto, he felt it. His connection to his chakra, the vast, burning sun of energy within him, became sluggish and weak. As if he were trying to breathe through water. It's seastone dust. Robin cried out, her own body feeling the enervating effect. It disrupts devil fruit powers, and it's doing something to your chakra. Naruto grit his teeth, forcing his energy through the invisible resistance. He could still make a clone, but it took 10 times the effort and the clone was weak, insubstantial. A Rasengan sputtered in his palm, half-formed, before dissipating. So this is their plan, he growled, watching as a fresh volley of standard cannonballs screamed towards them. They're not trying to kill me. They're trying to turn me off. The crew didn't panic. They had faced overwhelming odds before. This was just a new flavor of impossible. Frankie, Luffy yelled. Coup de burst. Get us to the main wall. Right behind you, brother. Frankie roared, aiming the Sunny's main cannon at the water behind them. Nami, we need cover, Sanji shouted, leaping to the railing. Nami held her klima tact, her eyes scanning the fortress, the wind, the clouds of seastone dust. The dust is heavy. If I can create enough updraft, she stabbed her staff towards the sky. Gust soared. A blade of wind shot up. But it was weaker than usual, disrupted by the unnatural stillness of the air. It wasn't enough. I'll give you a boost. Naruto yelled. He forced his chakra, pushing past the debilitating effect of the dust. His hands flew through a series of seals. Wind style. Great breakthrough. He expelled a massive gust of air from his lungs. It wasn't his strongest, but it was enough. The wind fed into Nami's, creating a powerful vortex that sucked a significant portion of the seastone dust up and away from the ship. Now, Frankie, super coup de burst. The Sunny launched into the air, soaring over the seastone nets and crashing onto the lower courtyard of the fortress with a bone-jarring shudder. They were inside. The battle had begun. What followed was coordinated, beautiful chaos. The Straw Hats moved as one, a single organism of destruction and purpose. Zoro, Sanji, you take the left flank. Usopp, Brook, cover them from the upper level. Frankie, you and me are on demolition duty. Chopper, with me. Luffy issued the orders, and the crew scattered, each member knowing their role. Naruto stood with Nami and Robin at the center of the courtyard, the heart of their strategy. I can't use my big jutsu while this dust is everywhere, he said, dodging a rifle volley. I'll have to rely on Sage Mode and Taijutsu. Then we'll be your jutsu, Nami said, her eyes blazing. She pointed her cleam attack at a platoon of marines charging them. Mirage Tempo. A dozen illusory Narutos appeared, confusing the soldiers, making them fire at thin air. Robin crossed her arms. Cyan Fleur. Delphinium. A chain of arms erupted from the ground, snaking through the marine ranks, tripping them, disarming them, snapping their rifles in two. Naruto moved through the chaos they created. He entered Sage Mode, the world snapping into focus. The natural energy of the fortress, muted and oppressed, flowed into him, counteracting the seastone dust just enough. He became a blur of orange and black, his movements amplified by Frog Kata. He didn't need a Rasengan. His punches, surrounded by an aura of natural energy, sent men flying without ever making physical contact. He was untouchable, a phantom weaving through the battlefield they controlled. High above, Oniguma watched with a furious scowl. He's adapting. He's fighting without his tricks. Useless. Deploy the pacifistas. Model Kuma, Mark III. Target the women. Take away his support. From hidden alcoves in the walls, 5 massive, lumbering figures emerged. They were pacifistas, but sleeker, faster, their eyes glowing with a more intelligent, malevolent red light. They ignored Naruto, their targeting systems locking onto Nami and Robin. They raised their hands, their palms glowing as they prepared to fire their devastating laser beams. Naruto sensed the danger, but he was pinned down by a squad of Rokushiki masters. Nami, Robin, we see them, Nami yelled. She and Robin stood back to back, a grim determination on their faces. Just keep their grunts off us. A pacifista fired. The laser beam shot towards Nami. Just before it hit, Robin acted. Accenta Fleur. Quattro Mano. Hold. 80 arms sprouted from the pacifista's body, grabbing its head, its arms, its legs, holding it in place. The laser beam, still firing, was locked in its trajectory. My turn, Nami shouted. Weather egg. She fired a small EG. G from her cleam attack that landed at the pacifista's feet. It hatched into a massive, dark thundercloud. Thunderbolt Tempo. A bolt of lightning crashed down, striking the pacifista. The giant cyborg shuddered, its systems shorting out from the electrical surge. At the same time, Nami used her Mirage Tempo to create a perfect reflection of herself 10 feet to the left. Another pacifista fired at the illusion, the beam uselessly blasting a crater in the wall. Their synergy was perfect, a deadly dance of misdirection and immobilization. They couldn't destroy the pacifistas, but they could outsmart them, using their own power against them. As the battle raged, Naruto felt a strange tremor under his feet. The natural energy he was drawing in was becoming more agitated, more powerful. The ancient power within the world, the one he had been warned about, was resonating with his own. The black stone of the fortress began to hum, and small cracks appeared in the courtyard, glowing with a faint, turquoise light. The sea around the fortress began to churn violently, waves crashing against the sea stacks with unnatural force. What's happening? Frankie yelled over the comms, having just blasted a cannon tower into scrap metal. The whole island is shaking. It's Naruto. Robin realized, her eyes wide. The energy he's drawing, it's waking this place up. Oniguma felt it too. Unstable energy readings. The foundations are cracking. It doesn't matter. All forces, converge on the central keep. Crush them before the island tears itself apart. The Straw Hats fought their way through the collapsing fortress, battling towards the central keep where they knew the final confrontation awaited. They regrouped at the base of the tower, battered but unbroken. Oniguma is up there, Naruto said, looking up at the imposing structure. And so is our poneglyph. I'll handle him. You guys find the stone and get ready to blow this place sky high. We're going with you, Nami said, her hand finding his. It's not a request, Robin added, her expression firm. Where you go, we go. Naruto looked at them, at the unwavering trust and love in their eyes. He nodded. All right, let's go pay our respects to the spider. The throne room of the keep was a chamber of steel and shadows. Vice Admiral Onagumo sat on a throne made of broken cannons, his 8 metallic arms clicking and whirring in the silence. "I knew you would come," he rasped, standing to his full, intimidating height. "The two of you stay back," he sneered at Nami and Robin. "This is between me and the anomaly who ruined me." His metal arms whirred to life, 2 of them unfolding into high-frequency blades, 2 revealing Gatling guns, 2 forming powerful pincer claws, and the final pair crackling with electricity. "The government gave me more than just a new body. They gave me a weapon designed just for you." He lunged, not with the brute force of their first encounter, but with a terrifying, spider-like speed. Naruto met him, his fists and feet a blur. It was a vicious, close-quarters battle. Onagumo's every attack was infused with a small amount of sea stone, a touch that would disrupt Naruto's Sage mode, forcing him to constantly disengage and refocus. "You can't maintain that power forever," Onagumo cackled, a blade nicking Naruto's arm. "Every time my metal touches you, you grow weaker. Then I'll just have to finish this before that happens." Naruto shot back, landing a powerful kick that dented the Admiral's metal torso. While they fought, Nami and Robin weren't idle. They were scanning the room, their eyes falling on the power conduits that snaked along the walls, all leading to Onagumo's throne. His augments, Robin deduced. They're drawing power directly from the fortress's main generator. And I'm great at causing blackouts. Nami grinned, a weather egg already in her hand. Working together, they became a 2-woman demolition team. Robin used her arms to rip open the protective casings on the conduits while Nami summoned a localized thundercloud inside the room, directing precise lightning strikes at the exposed wiring. Onagumo faltered as sparks erupted from his metallic joints. "What are you doing?" he roared, his movements becoming sluggish as his power supply sputtered. It was the opening Naruto needed. He poured all the natural energy he could gather into one final attack. He didn't need a jutsu. He just needed his fist. He drove it forward, a perfect, silent strike of frog kata that carried the weight of the angry, awakening island itself. The blow connected with Onagumo's chest. There was no grand explosion, only a sickening crunch of metal and a final, choked gasp. The Vice Admiral was thrown backward, crashing into his throne, his cybernetic eyes flickering and dying. The reckoning was complete. The fortress was coming down around them. The crew, having found and secured the poneglyph which was, as they'd hoped, a crucial piece of the true history, sent up the signal. As they stood on the crumbling tower, Naruto, Nami, and Robin looked out at the chaos they had wrought. They had faced the world government's ultimate prison and broken it. They had stood together, fought together, and won together. As Frankie prepped the Sunny for an emergency coup to burst off the collapsing sea stack, Naruto wrapped his arms around the 2 women who had become his entire world. The dust, the smoke, the roar of the dying fortress, none of it mattered. In the heart of the storm, he had found his calm. They had found their strength. And the world government now knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Golden Maelstrom and the Straw Hat Pirates were not just a storm they could weather, but a force of nature that could reshape the world. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God and the Jinchuriki. The escape from Judgment's Gate was not a clean one. It was a frantic, desperate flight from the heart of a dying Leviathan. The Thousand Sunny, propelled by a groaning, overworked coup de burst, launched itself from the peak of the central keep just as the entire structure imploded, collapsing into a vortex of churning water and grinding stone. The sea around them was a maelstrom. Waves the size of mountains smashing against the remaining sea stacks, which crumbled like sandcastles. The sky, already a canvas of stormy gray, was now choked with a black plume of smoke and dust. This was more than just the destruction of a fortress. This was the world itself convulsing. Naruto, standing on the deck, could feel it with every fiber of his being. The natural energy he had drawn upon, amplified by the raw, primal nature of the island, was now a runaway torrent. It was the planet's awakening, but it was a violent, feverish awakening that threatened to tear this corner of the sea apart. "The ship can't take much more of this," Frankie roared from the helm, fighting to keep the Sunny from being capsized by the unnatural waves. "These currents are insane. It's like the whole ocean is having a seizure." It was in the eye of this man-made hurricane that he appeared. The world went silent. The raging waves froze in place, their crests like jagged glass. The howling wind died. The falling debris hung suspended in the air. Time, sound, and motion ceased to be. From the black clouds above, a single, brilliant beam of gold pierced the gloom, illuminating a throne of pearl and light. Saint Icarus descended, his expression no longer one of detached curiosity, but of cold, righteous fury. He looked upon the chaos, the destruction, the untamed power, and saw not the consequence of his own making, but the validation of his purpose. I warned you, anomaly, his voice echoed in their minds, sharp and cold as a winter wind. I showed you the consequence of your chaotic nature. And still, you persisted. Look around you. This destruction is not my doing. It is yours. It is the inevitable result of a flaw in creation being allowed to fester. It is your true, inescapable destiny, to bring ruin. He was not just here to fight. He was here to pass judgment. You speak of freedom, Icarus continued, his gaze sweeping over the frozen forms of the straw hats, but you bring only anarchy. You speak of dreams, but you leave only wreckage. I offered you a perfect, quiet garden. You chose a wilderness of fire and flood. The time for pruning is over. It is time to burn the weeds, root and stem. His declaration broke the stasis. The world roared back to life, but now it was a weapon aimed at them. The suspended debris rained down, not randomly, but as a concentrated barrage. The waves crashed, not against the rocks, but towards the sunny. He's controlling it, Nami screamed, her knuckles white on her klima tacked. He's using the chaos Naruto started and aiming it at us. The straw hats didn't hesitate. They had faced gods and monsters. This was just another Tuesday. He talks too much, Zoro growled, tying his bandana around his head. He drew his 3 swords. Santoryu Ogi, Ichidai Sanzen Daisen Sakai. He unleashed his ultimate technique, a slash of such immense power it could cleave a mountain. The blade of compressed air shot towards the throne. But it never connected. A foot from Icarus, the slash simply unraveled. The immense power dissolved into a harmless breeze. Your ambition is fated to fall short, Icarus intoned, not even bothering to look. Then have a taste of science. Frankie yelled, taking aim. Gown cannon. A massive, concentrated blast of air erupted from the Sunny's lion mouth. It flew true, only to be redirected at the last second by an unseen force. A fated shift in the wind that sent it harmlessly into the sky. Sanji leapt into the air, his leg wreathed in the white-hot flames of Ifrit Hambi. Your fate is to get kicked in the damn face. He roared, his kick a blur of motion. He struck an invisible wall, a point in space where his attack was simply not meant to be. The force of the impact sent him recoiling back towards the ship. They were flies buzzing against a pane of glass. Their power, their will, their very actions were irrelevant to a being who could simply decide they were destined to fail. Naruto watched, a cold, hard knot forming in his stomach. He was the only one. His existence was the error in Icarus's code. He was the only one who could touch him. He entered Sage mode, the Fami. Liar orange markings a stark contrast to the grim set of his jaw. He vanished from the deck, reappearing directly in front of Icarus's throne, his fist cocked back, amplified with the invisible force of Frog Kata. For the first time, Icarus was forced to act. He raised a hand, not to block, but to rewrite. Your blow is fated to have no weight. Naruto's fist, which should have carried the force of a battering ram, connected with Icarus's palm with all the impact of a falling leaf. The celestial dragon didn't even flinch. You see, Icarus said, a faint, condescending smile on his lips. Even you, anomaly, must obey the rules of the story. And I am the author. He counterattacked not with a punch, but with a statement. Your heart is fated to flutter. Naruto gasped, a sudden arrhythmia staggering him in midair. Your next breath is fated to be shallow. The air in his lungs seemed to turn thin, useless. This was not a fight. It was a deconstruction. Icarus was unmaking him, piece by agonizing piece. Naruto was forced back, dodging, weaving, his peerless taijutsu the only thing keeping him in the fight as he battled not just his opponent, but reality itself. It was then that the world chose its side. From the churning sea below, a colossal pillar of water erupted, not as a random wave, but as a cohesive, targeted spear aimed directly at Icarus's throne. The celestial dragon's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He was forced to divert his attention, waving a hand to impose a new fate on the ocean itself, causing the water sphere to collapse. But the attack had been a distraction. The very stones of the ruined fortress, imbued with the world's awakened energy, tore themselves from the seabed and flew at him like a meteor shower. Icarus was now on the defensive, his calm arrogance replaced by a flash of irritated fury. The garden itself rebels, insolent. He stood from his throne, his arms spread wide, pouring more of his power into suppressing the planet's will. The waves calmed, the stones fell. But it took a visible effort. His perfect, absolute control was being stretched thin. He couldn't control the Straw Hats, the anomaly, and the world all at the same time. It was the opening they needed. But Naruto was weakening, Icarus's debilitating, fates, taking their toll. On the deck of the Sunny, Nami and Robin watched, their hearts aching. They felt Naruto's struggle, his desperation. They saw Icarus, enraged and momentarily distracted, preparing to focus his full, undivided attention on ending the anomaly for good. The prophecy, Nami whispered, her eyes wide with a terrifying, brilliant idea. A union of sun and sea. Robin's mind raced, connecting the prophecy to the knowledge from the Isle of Echoes, the text from the Ohara artifact. It wasn't about breeding. The ancient glyph for union wasn't just about a physical joining. It could also mean a confluence, a willing channel. It wasn't a demand, it was an instruction. Nami, Robin said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The ancient power, the world's life force, Naruto is its beacon, but he can't control it. It's too chaotic. It needs a guide. It needs a map. Nami looked at her, understanding dawning in her eyes. The sea, she breathed. I can read the sea. I can feel its currents, its will. And I, Robin added, holding up her hands, can read the language of history. I can shape the intent. It was an insane gamble, a ritual pieced together from a dying culture's last hope. It was a choice born not of prophecy, but of pure, desperate love. They stood together on the storm-tossed deck, Nami closing her eyes to feel the raging pulse of the ocean, Robin beginning to trace ancient, glowing glyphs in the air before her. They were not tools of destiny. They were partners in defiance. Naruto, Nami yelled, her voice carrying over the wind. We're with you. Take it all. She raised her claim attacked, not as a weapon, but as a conductor's baton, plunging it into the deck of the Sunny. She opened herself up completely to the raging storm, not to control it, but to guide it. The raw, turquoise energy of the awakened world, which had been lashing out blindly, now saw a path. It surged up from the sea, a torrent of pure life, and funneled into her. Robin stood before her, her arms crossed, a network of spectral, glyph-covered arms surrounding them both. The will of the world must have a voice. She chanted, the ancient words feeling right on her tongue. The anger of the sea must have a shape. We offer our will, our hearts, our lives, not to fate, but to him. The chaotic energy, channeled through Nami and shaped by Robin, became a coherent, brilliant stream of turquoise light. It shot from them, a bridge of impossible power, and struck Naruto in the back. He roared, his body convulsing as the raw life force of the world poured into him. It was agonizing, overwhelming. But it was not alien. It was the same energy he touched in Sage mode, but magnified a million times. Kurama, within him, roared in unison, the fox's own immense chakra acting as a container, a crucible to hold the flood. Naruto's appearance changed. The orange of his Sage mode was subsumed by a brilliant, turquoise glow. His golden chakra cloak erupted, but it was now interwoven with swirling patterns of turquoise light, like currents in an ocean of sun. Ancient glyphs, the very language of history, momentarily appeared on his skin before being absorbed. He had become the union, the living embodiment of the sun, the sea, and history itself. Icarus stared, his divine composure utterly shattered, replaced by something he had not felt in centuries, fear. Impossible. You cannot wield the planet's soul. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer blue, or gold, but luminous. World-encompassing turquoise. He raised his hand, and in his palm, a new Rasengan began to form. It was a core of brilliant, golden sun, surrounded by a swirling, violent vortex of turquoise natural energy. And within the sphere, spinning like a galaxy of stars, were the shimmering glyphs of the true history. This was not a technique. This was a verdict. This world isn't your garden, Naruto said. His voice now a chorus of his own, the world's, and the countless souls of history. It's our home. He called the attack. Tensai Rasengan. Reincarnation sphere. He thrust it forward. Icarus, in a panic, erected a wall of absolute fate. This attack is destined to fail. It is destined to not exist. But the Tensai Rasengan was not a part of his story. It was the collected will of a world that had existed long before him and intended to exist long after. It was a truth more fundamental than his parasitic power. It struck the wall of fate, and the wall shattered like glass. The sphere engulfed Saint Icarus. There was no scream. There was only a brilliant, silent flash of light that erased the darkness from the sky. The attack did not destroy his body. It destroyed his connection. It severed the parasitic bond of the Kami Kami no Mi, cleansing his soul of the godhood he had stolen. The golden throne dissolved into dust. And from the fading light, a man fell, just a man. Pale and trembling in a ridiculous white robe, his eyes no longer empty, but filled with the sudden, crushing terror of mortality. He splashed into the now calm sea below. The god had been dethroned. The unnatural storm ceased. The waves gentled. The sky began to clear. On the deck of the Sunny, Naruto collapsed to his knees, the immense power receding, leaving him utterly exhausted. Nami and Robin, drained but alive, rushed to his side, supporting him. The rest of the Straw Hats gathered around them, their faces a mixture of awe, relief, and fierce, unshakable pride. They had faced a god who wrote the rules of reality and had watched their friends tear up the page. They had won. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. A new dawn, a new journey. The silence that followed the blinding flash of the Tensai Rasengan was more profound than any Icarus had imposed. It was a true silence, the sound of a world holding its breath after a fever had broken. The raging, unnatural sea gentled into a soft, rolling swell. The black, choking clouds parted, allowing the first rays of a weary sun to pierce the gloom, painting the tranquil water in hues of gold and rose. The war against fate was over. On the deck of the Thousand Sunny, reality slowly filtered back in. Naruto crumpled, not with a crash, but with the quiet, boneless exhaustion of a marathon runner collapsing past the finish line. The immense, world-spanning power receded from him, leaving behind a deep, aching weariness. He would have hit the deck if not for Nami and Robin, who caught him, their own bodies trembling with fatigue. And lowered him gently to the salt-stained wood. The three of them knelt there for a long moment, a tangled heap of relief and exhaustion, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling in the clean, new air. The rest of the Straw Hats, who had been frozen in a state of stunned awe, rushed forward. Chopper, his doctor's instincts overriding his shock, was at their side in an instant, his eyes scanning them for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice a high-pitched squeak of worry. "Your life signs were all over the place. It was like you were a storm." "We're okay, Chopper," Nami managed, her voice hoarse. She didn't let go of Naruto's hand. "Just tired." "Tired doesn't even begin to cover it," Naruto mumbled, a weak but genuine grin on his face. He felt like he had run 1,000 miles and fought 1,000 wars. But looking at the two women beside him, he also felt a profound, bone-deep peace he had never known. It was Luffy who broke the spell of the aftermath. He walked to the railing, his straw hat shadowing his eyes, and peered down into the water. There, floating amidst the debris of his ruined fortress, was a man in a soaked, ridiculous white robe, sputtering and flailing weakly. The former Saint Icarus, now just a man, was drowning. "Zoro," Luffy said, his voice quiet and even. Zoro was there in an instant, understanding the unspoken command. He leapt onto the railing, a rope in his hand, and with a few deft movements, hauled the pathetic, sputtering form of the dethroned god onto the deck. Icarus collapsed in a heap, coughing up seawater, his body trembling not from the cold, but from a terror so profound it had stolen his voice. His eyes, no longer divine and empty, were wide with the panicked, animal fear of a mortal man who had just looked into the abyss. He looked at the pirates standing over him, at the anomaly who had unmade him, and saw not weeds in a garden, but a pantheon of vengeful gods. What do we do with him?" Usopp asked, his usual bravado gone, replaced by a sense of uncomfortable pity. The crew looked at Luffy. This was his call. They had faced down a being who had tried to erase them from existence. By all rights, they had earned their vengeance. Luffy walked over and squatted down, looking Icarus in the eye. There was no anger on his face, no malice. Only a simple, final judgment. You wanted to be a god, Luffy said, his voice devoid of its usual cheer. But gods don't exist. There are just people, strong people and weak people. People who are free, and people who try to put others in cages. He stood up. You're not strong anymore, and you're not a god. You're just a person. Go live with it. He turned his back on the trembling man. Leave him on the next island we see. A normal island, with normal people. Let him figure out how to live a life that wasn't written for him. For a man like Icarus, who had lived a life of absolute power and detachment, there could be no greater punishment than to be forced to live a normal, insignificant life, to be forgotten by the world he had tried to control. The next few days were a blur of recovery and repair. Frankie, with the help of Usopp and the rest of the crew, worked tirelessly to patch the Sunny's wounds. The ship was battered and bruised but, like its crew, its spirit was unbroken. Chopper brewed restorative medicines, and Sanji outdid himself, repairing meals that were not just delicious but seemed to knit their very souls back together. During this time, Robin sequestered herself in the library with the poneglyph they had risked everything to acquire. She emerged on the third evening, her expression one of tired triumph. She gathered everyone in the galley. It's a continuation of the vital poneglyph, she announced, her voice resonating with the weight of her discovery. It confirms everything. Icarus's defeat, Naruto's final attack, it didn't just stop the awakening. It completed it. What does that mean, Robin? Chopper asked. It means the world is awake again. She explained. The natural energy, the planet's life force that the false gods suppressed for 800 years, is free. It's flowing through the sea, the sky, the islands. The world is more alive than it has been in centuries. She looked at Nami. You must feel it in the currents, in the wind. Nami nodded, a look of wonder on her face. I do. The sea, it talks more clearly now. The weather is still wild, but it has a rhythm, a pulse I can understand. It feels younger, stronger. The poneglyph says this new era will be one of chaos and creation, Robin continued. And it says that the path to Raftel, the final island, can only be navigated by those who can hear the world's new song. It's not just about following the log pose anymore. It's about following the heartbeat of the world itself. A new, profound challenge lay before them. But for the first time, it didn't feel like an obstacle. It felt like an invitation. That night, the sea was a calm, star-dusted mirror. Naruto sat on the lawn of the Sunny's deck, leaning against the main mast. He wasn't meditating. He was just breathing, feeling the gentle roll of the ship, the cool night air on his skin. He felt a presence and opened his eyes to see Nami and Robin approaching, a shared, soft smile on their faces. They sat down with him, Nami on his right, Robin on his left, their shoulders pressing against his. They sat in a comfortable, perfect silence for a long time, watching the constellations wheel overhead. The prophecy, Nami said finally, her voice a soft murmur in the quiet. A union to birth a new era. We did it, didn't we? It was never about a child, Robin added, her gaze thoughtful. Or, at least, not in the way we first thought. It was about the rebirth of the world itself. A new age of freedom. Maybe, Naruto said, looking from one to the other, his heart full. But the prophecy didn't make it happen. We did. You did. He reached out, taking their hands. Nami's was warm and calloused from years of gripping a helm and a bow staff. Robin's was cool and elegant, the hands of a scholar. You made a choice. You trusted me. That wasn't destiny. That was you. We all chose. Nami corrected him gently, her thumb stroking the back of his hand. You chose to stay, to fight for a world that wasn't yours. It is now, he said, and the words felt more true than anything he had ever spoken. He looked at the endless ocean, at the unfamiliar stars. He had been torn from his home, from everything he had ever known. He had been summoned as a tool, a weapon to fulfill a prophecy. But in this strange, chaotic world, with these impossible, infuriating, and fiercely loyal people, he had found something he hadn't even realized he'd been searching for. He looked at Nami, at her fiery spirit and brilliant mind, the fierce protector hidden behind a veneer of greed. He looked at Robin, at her quiet strength and deep wisdom, the gentle soul who carried the weight of a slaughtered people. He loved them. It was a truth as simple and as profound as the sea itself. It wasn't a romance born of convenience or circumstance. It was a bond forged in the fires of shared battle, shared pain, and a shared, defiant will to live. So what now? Nami asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. Now, Robin said, leaning against his other side, we continue the journey. We find the One Piece. We learn the true history. And we live. Naruto wrapped his arms around them both, pulling them close. I have a new home, he whispered, a smile finally reaching his eyes, bright and clear and utterly at peace. A new family, and a new dream. That's more than enough for me. They stayed like that, under the vast, silent sky, three souls who had been lost and had found their way, not to a destination, but to each other. Their future wasn't written in any prophecy. It was a blank map, and they would draw it together. The next morning, a news crew dropped a paper on the deck. The world was in an uproar. Marine Fortress GX had been completely erased from the map. And there, on the front page, were 3 new wanted posters. Monkey D. Luffy's bounty had skyrocketed to a jaw-dropping 3 billion belly. Nico Robin's had climbed to nearly 1 billion, the title, Demon of Ohara, now joined by World Unraveler. And then there was his. A picture of him in Sage mode, taken during the chaos at Water 7. The name read, Maelstrom, Naruto Uzumaki. And the bounty beneath it was a number so high it was almost laughable, 5 billion belly. The highest active bounty in the world. The caption was simple, threat to the gods. Dead or alive. The crew's reaction was a symphony of chaos. Usopp and Chopper fainted. Frankie struck a tearful, proud pose. Sanji was furious that Naruto's bounty was higher than his. Zoro just smirked, seeing it as a new mountain to climb. Luffy just laughed, that great, booming, infectious laugh. Awesome, he cheered. We're the most wanted crew in the world. The king of the pirates needs a crew like that. He jumped onto the Sunny's lion head, pointing a determined finger at the horizon. All right, everyone, full speed ahead, to the next island, the next adventure. The Thousand Sunny, battered but triumphant, turned its prow towards the rising sun. It sailed on a sea that felt new, on a wind that sang a song of freedom. Naruto stood at the railing. Nami and Robin on either side of him, their hands linked. He looked ahead at the endless blue, at the promise of a future he would build with his own hands, with his new family. His journey was far from over. In a way, it had just begun. Chapter 10 End.